I want to welcome everybody. I'm Ron Senimore, President of the Council of Fort Lauderdale Civic Associations. I want to wish you all a Happy New Year, and I hope it's a prosperous one for all of you. I'm going to be brief, and first thing we're going to do is the Pledge of Allegiance. If you would please stand. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. God bless America. Thank you. Tonight's meeting is strictly the forum for the candidates. As most of you know, or for the new people here, the council comprises of neighborhoods throughout the city. There's some 60 neighborhoods in the city and 40 plus belong to the council. What we address is citywide issues. So if you have, most citywide issues would be like traffic, the homelessness, crime. So these are the things we address, development and the structure. So these things that we bring forward, and tonight is one of the items that we bring to you so you could be well informed. I'm going to be really brief here and turn it over in just a second. I'd like you to know that today is National Police Appreciation Day. So for those of you besides Bruce and I who served as police officers here, we want to thank you for all your years of service. Okay, with no further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Steve Buckingham. Steve was the chair of the committee that put this forum together. I want to thank him for all his hard effort, and I want to thank the members of his committee that put this together. So, Steve.
Thank you, Ron. Thank you, Ron. Formed in 1980, the Council of Fort Lauderdale Civic Associations focuses on the issues relating to preservation of the present and future welfare of the city of Fort Lauderdale, its neighbors, and its citizens. Meeting monthly on the second Tuesday of each month at City Hall, the Council of Fort Lauderdale Civic Associations is a coalition of civic and homeowners associations recognized by the city of Fort Lauderdale. There are over 40 neighborhood associations throughout the city. You are all invited to our meetings every month, so please come. True to the Council's mission to be a steadfast advocate for the city's neighborhoods, this event is meant to help neighbors make an informed voting decision for our city's next mayor and commission. We wish to thank the following people who have helped to make and produce this event. Hal Barnes and Louisa Agathon from the Neighbor Support Office. Quick round of applause, please. Chaz Adams from the City of Fort Lauderdale Communications Department. David Solomon from the City Clerk's Office and all city staff who helped us with this event. I want to thank my committee co-chairs, Marilyn Mamano, Betty Shelley, Colleen Lockwood, for being part of the Council's Forum Organizing Committee. We thank the Council Board for their input and support, the Council membership for supporting dozens and dozens of questions in advance and being here tonight. We thank the candidates who are participating tonight and demonstrating the courage to step forward to lead our city. We thank all of you who came here tonight, and all of you watching on Channel 78 and online. We thank you very much for being part of this event. And of course, big thanks to our forum moderator, Brittany Wallman, senior reporter with the Sun Sentinel. So with no further ado, I introduce you, Brittany Wallman. Thank you so very, very much. Thank you.
Hi, good evening. Thank you very much. I am your moderator. Let me briefly give you the format for this evening. We're going to take each race separately, starting with spending an hour with the mayoral candidates. At roughly 7:45, we will move to District 2. At roughly 8:30, we'll move to District 3. At roughly 9, we'll move to District 4. Just to note, we already have a new commissioner in District 1. Heather Moritas was elected without opposition. She couldn't be here this evening because she's with her husband, State Rep George Moritas in Tallahassee, but I'm sure we'll get to know her better very soon. The primary election is Tuesday, 1 week from this evening. The general election is March 13th. All Fort Lauderdale voters can vote in the mayor's race. In the district races, only voters who live in those districts can vote, and the races are nonpartisan. I formulated the list of questions using input from voters all around the city. I'm going to play it by ear a little bit, so if you'll bear with me while I rifle through pages. But I got an enormous number of questions from people on a wide variety of topics. And so in the interest of time, we're not going to have intros. There should be a bio for each candidate in your handout. When we start with the questions, there will be 1-minute answers, and Steve in the back will hold up a card when you should wrap it up. You would have 5 seconds left, and then there will be an audible, and then I noticed we have a bunch of police officers somewhere that could help us enforce. If you hear your name, candidates, and you want to rebut something that another candidate says, just, flash a sign, and we'd like you to keep the rebuttals to about 30 seconds if you could, so that we can cover as many topics as possible. If you'd like to follow coverage beyond this, on Twitter, I'm at Brittany Wallman. The candidates all have websites, and of course, sunsentinel.com. All right then, let's get started. I'm going to introduce the candidates, but I'm sure you already know who they are. Bruce Roberts, Charlotte Rodstrom, and Dean Trentalis. We're going to start with Bruce, and then we'll change up who starts each time, and then just go to your left. Let's start with Bahia Mar, something that's been on a lot of people's minds and was one of the largest controversies to face this city commission in the last term. Many of the candidates running in this election have said that they would like to see the lease renegotiated to reduce the number of apartments allowed. So even though the site plan has been approved, it's conceivable that this issue could come back to the city commission. Jimmy Tate, the leaseholder, said he's content to build the site plan that was approved, but if he were approached by the city to renegotiate the lease, he would entertain it. So as mayor, if this issue came back to you, would you be open to extending to a 99-year lease or to allowing condos rather than rental apartments on the public land?
Well, I think we're going to have, as Tate had said and as the commissioners have said in the past, we'll have to take a look at the holistic approach to that and look at it generally. Would I be open to further discussions? Absolutely. Absolutely. In all manners related to that. Do we have 90 seconds in this?
60.
660. Are we going to come back to this later? I'm sorry to...
Yes.
This question, because this...
But you
I
can
want to answer that one specifically, so I didn't want to
You can elaborate on your vote if you want.
That's what I wanted to talk about, is the vote, but I don't know if I get it done in a short period of time. So the vote that I had for Bahia Mar with the other four, it was a 4-1 vote, as most of you know, in favor of the Bahia Mar project. I did that for several reasons. First and foremost, I look at it as an economic necessity for the city of Fort Lauderdale to keep the boat show here. The boat show site plan was developed with a new boat show owner and former out of London, England, the Marine Industry Association of South Florida, strongly supported with letters of recommendation to go forward with it by the Broward Alliance, the Broward Workshop, and the Greater Fort Lauderdale Chamber of Commerce. Now we have a 30-year lease. And if I get more time into that later on too, there are specific legal ramifications as to what we could or couldn't do, which is in that particular lease. That was discussed at length during several meetings over the past several years. And I believe, based on the information I received from our city attorney and a memorandum included in the back of material for that public hearing, that we were somewhat restricted in what we could do with that list, with that lease in Articles 17 and 24. If you go back to where we were when we had the icon on Las Olas, that lawsuit the city got involved in with the Historic Society, we ended up pulling back out of that lawsuit, but that lawsuit was won by that property owner. So there are certain rights within that lease, and I'll probably get into it some more over there. I went on to the time period.
Okay, thank you. Charlotte.
I believe the question was whether I would renegotiate the lease for a 99-year lease.
And would you be
And would I be
open to
interested in condos? No. I can honestly tell you that would not be something that I would look at. And I will do some rebuttal now with Bruce. The 30-year agreement that he's stating, there is no one has seen the 30-year agreement. So I can tell you that how can you determine economic development when no one's seen the 30-year agreement between the boat show and the Tates? I've asked the city manager today, I public records, whatever there was, there is nothing for them to show us. So unless you saw something different than everybody else in this room has seen, I don't know how you could have made the decision for economic development. I certainly wouldn't have approved a building like this based upon letters of recommendation from others. Thank you.
Bruce, go ahead.
I have a letter in my backup material I read when we had a debate at the Performing Arts Center on the boat show, and the support that was given to it by informing the others. I'll just briefly read the one paragraph that I read back then too from...
But this is not the agreement, this is a letter.
This is a letter.
You didn't
This is
see
a
the
letter.
30-year agreement that you're quoting?
Let me finish.
No.
Okay, you can come back and rebut.
I thought we were
It's
rebuttaling.
important to you.
We're debating,
let me
right?
finish this
Sorry about
here.
that.
Approval of the BMR boat show, BMR site plan is critical to the future of the Fort Lauderdale International Boat Show. We entered a long-term lease and contract with the developers for one and only one reason, to create the world's best yacht and boating event. This is not possible with the present venue limitations. However, the plans we worked out for the developers to design will ensure that we accomplish this goal. Plus, we also have backup in a memorandum from a city auditor demonstrating that we would more than double the income from this thing when it's completed in 10 years. And also, that doesn't include ad valorem taxes. And there are other backup materials that support this that we can get into later on, but they are there.
Thank you, Dean.
Once again, I will rebuttal again quickly because I didn't get to finish my whatever minutes you're giving me.
Okay, go ahead.
The agreement that's 30 years nobody has seen, to make a decision on public property for a project that has 651 residential units without a contract or an agreement visually looked at by the commission is irresponsible at best. So that would have been something I would have never done.
Please,
Thank you.
no applause, please. Thank you. Dean?
Well, welcome to the Bruce and Charlotte Show.
You can participate.
So, as everybody knows, I was the only commissioner to vote against the Bahia Mar project. And I would do it again, and I would do it again. The idea of extending the lease to 99 years and firmly cementing residential on public land is an anathema to what I believe is right for our community. This is public land, everybody. This should never have been put out for private development. And when you look at the site, the 651 units with the multiple buildings there, do you see a space for the boat show? I know we read letters, and I know that we've had talk, but when you talk to the people behind closed doors, they are afraid of what's going to happen to the boat show. They can have a 30-year agreement, but they're never going to live up to it because they can't live up to it. So to answer your question, Brittany, we need to turn back this development. If we're going to renegotiate, it's not to increase the number of units, it's not to increase the number of years, it's to try to minimize it and to try to reduce it to where it works for the people and not just for private developers. Thank you.
But you would not support condos even if it were a reduced number?
I am not supporting condos. It's public property. We don't put private development on public lands.
And I'm going to rebuttal that also, because as you know, I live off of Las Olas Isles, and the BMR project is greatly going to impact my neighborhood and the people that live around me. You had hundreds, I would say 100 people show up for that meeting that lasted until 3:30 in the morning. I was one of them, and I spoke as a citizen
I was one of those too.
rather than a commissioner. Yeah, but you're the policy setter, and you set the policy, and you let it go on till 3:30 in the morning. I had no choice. I had
Okay,
to sit there.
Charlotte, but your
Sorry.
name was not mentioned, so...
Sorry. All right, so to make a long story short with that is, you're a soft no, Dean. I'm a hell no. There's a big difference.
Soft though.
Yeah.
Okay. That was enough. You
Wait a
didn't-
minute.
Let's
She
switch
brought
it
up my
up.
name, Brittany. I got to respond to that.
You can, please.
Just so that you know, Charlotte, I was there late into the night, and I had piles of documentation. I sat there, and I repeatedly stood up for the people of this community who have again and again said, this is the wrong development. It's the wrong development, the wrong place, the wrong time. for our community. So don't you dare say I was a soft no, because you weren't even there. You spoke for a couple of minutes. The rest of us had to stand up against the onslaught of testimony that is trying to impose this development on our community. So let's just talk about how good you are, Charlotte. You don't stop talking about how bad everybody else is. If you can't talk about yourself, then you obviously don't have anything good to say about yourself. So to make yourself...
Wait a minute, you were the district commissioner, you should have said no.
Why don't you
Ding, ding.
just stick to yourself and stop bad-mouthing your...
All right, no personal attacks.
Okay.
I
Let's
attacked
move to
your
a new
voting.
topic. How about that? And guess what? If you mention one of your competitors, then they get to speak again. So maybe you shouldn't do that. Another top issue that voters want to hear from you about is the wave rail system. Today at the County Commission, they were scheduled to vote on whether to rebid to see, because as you know, the bids came in much higher than anticipated. They need to vote in order to rebid. They ended up just postponing the vote. So we don't know what will happen with that. But if the new bids are low enough, would you still want to kill the wave? And we'll start with Charlotte this time.
The information that I have about the rebid is that they were going to rebid it and take out the infrastructure, the sewer and water infrastructure component of it to lower the price of the bid. That would be a major problem because somebody's going to have to pick up that tab, and it would be the city of Fort Lauderdale. As you all know, we have a major infrastructure problem with water and sewer today, and they're diverting funds from that account, and we can't seem to make the necessary repairs quick enough. Would I still want to kill the wave? Yes, because let me tell you something. The route is nothing like it was 10 years ago. The overhead wires have not been fixed. The fact that they're going to take trees down is another boondoggle. It cannot go over the railroad tracks to Sistrunk. It is not going to the airport. It is not going to Sawgrass, and it's not going to the port. All the things that 10 years ago in the concept, that was planned. I will have you know that the City Commission signed an agreement last year to pay for 25% of the cost overruns as the city's share. That's information that you need to know when they go ahead and tell you that they don't vote for it or they didn't vote for it because they did for 30 times. Didn't mention any names.
Dean?
I think when the wave was first conceived about 20 years ago, we all thought it would be kind of a cute thing to run through Flagler Village, and it was sort of interesting. We thought it was a little nostalgic, and everyone sort of bought into it. The developers got hold of the idea and said, hey, we can go into this idea by eliminating parking in our new development and by trying to encourage people to think they can live downtown and not use their cars. Well, the whole thing got completely blown out of perspective. We don't even have the route to the airport. We don't have the route to the seaport. It goes nowhere, it does nothing, and it costs $100 million a mile. The technology is 2 centuries ago. We don't need this. I would be the first to eliminate it and let the people whose money has been taxed these last couple of years return your money to you. Let's get rid of this concept called the wave, and let's really focus on our transportation needs. Thank you. Bruce?
Yeah, I think we're all in agreement here. In fact, I've already asked our city attorney at a couple of commission meetings ago to start working on how we untie that Gordian knot and how we refund the money to the property owners and how we get ourselves out of those agreements with 4 other entities. As everybody knows, Broward County owns and operates that system. FDOT was going to build a system, and the MPO is also a partner in that. And also, as everybody should know too, the 70% of that money is federal and state grants, which cannot be repurposed. That's fine if we return it because we don't want to continue into a contract. It will be a bottomless pit that we can't support going into the future. But it is something that I've already asked our city attorney to look into, and it was pointed out by, I think, Dean. The other thing that bothered me is the county at its workshop, transportation workshop at the end of October, removed the potential future route, which would have been to the airport. And if any one of the selling features that should have been an airport route, that's not there. So then I'm figuring, we're not going to have control over where these routes go in the future, too. So without that type of control, without that type, why should we be supporting it monetarily? So the answer to that is no, we're going to undo that.
Okay, spinning off from that, if the wave is killed, and we know that the Sun Trolley is faltering right now, how would you address traffic? One consistent complaint from voters, if not the top complaint, is traffic. Yet, instead of widening or adding roads, the city has adopted a complete streets approach, which is friendly to pedestrians and bike riders and people that are not in cars, and we're seeing driving lanes removed from roads, as is proposed, for example, on Las Olas Boulevard. So do you support that trend? And if so, how would you address traffic for the people that are still in a car? Dean.
Thank you, Brittany. I think the biggest mistake we're making is narrowing our roads to the point where they're unusable. Look at Las Olas Boulevard. A vote was taken by the commission to bring that road down to 2 lanes. And how can you possibly pass through that? How can people come to and from? The Las Olas Isles folks are choking in their inability to be able to leave their homes. Emergency vehicles, how can they get through traffic like that? Creating bikeways is a great idea for the future, but to sacrifice the travel lanes for vehicles goes to show you how narrow-minded we are when it comes to the future of our city. I think that we need to work together with the county, because the county does maintain the major transportation operations with buses and so forth, and we need to be consistent with the county's efforts, trying to synchronize our traffic light signals, trying to make sure that bus routes make sense and they don't pass through our streets empty the way they do today. And the Sun Trolley is not the answer, but there is an answer in working with the county and making this happen. Thank you.
Bruce.
Our traffic problem is tough. We all know that. Just let me give you some numbers about the traffic, though. A lot of it's related to employment and work figures. 2 years ago, I sit on the MPOs as vice chair, which is Metropolitan Planning Organization, which deals with traffic and traffic mitigation issues. We have 132,000 people coming into the city every day to work. We have almost 50,000 people leaving the city to go to work, and you have another 20,000 circulating within the city. That's about 200,000 people every day working. Those figures are 2 years old. With our unemployment figures going further down, I'm anticipating that's even more traffic related to that. And then when you add to the traffic when we talk about our tourism, 16 million tourists come to Broward County, half of which based on bed tax revenue come to Fort Lauderdale. That adds to our traffic issues. Then you look at this, we are a dynamic city, and we are a very vital city. When you look at the entertainment and special events we provide, the Performing Arts Center, you look at the beach events, you look at the events downtown, that's what we are about. You look at the governmental facilities, the courthouses. We are the center of the county. We're going to have those types of issues, and I want to be able to get back to this later because there's a lot more to talk about on this, if you wouldn't mind. I think all of us could follow up on that.
Thank you. Charlotte?
Well, I'll tell you what, traffic is definitely because of the development. So if you're going to add population, as my opponents have done, 8,000 more units, you can't narrow the roads. It doesn't work. I don't know who in the world thinks with common sense that that works. You don't add population and you don't narrow the roads. As far as the bicyclers, and we answered this question at the last thing we were at, you can ask the bicyclers, target them, to encourage them to go through the neighborhoods. Coley-Hammock, Beverly Heights, beautiful neighborhoods to ride a bike. I'm a bike rider. It's safe. You're not right with the cars. Do we need to synchronize the lights? Yes, that is a county problem, and that's something that they have issues with doing. Never forget that there are 3 governmental entities that own properties, own roads in our city: the state, the county, and the city of Fort Lauderdale. Someone needs to work with all 3 of those entities to solve these traffic problems. But first and foremost, you cannot add any more population by overdeveloping and continue to narrow the roads. Thank you.
In this campaign, the M word, moratorium, has been uttered a time or two. And if you were elected, would you entertain the idea of any temporary building moratorium in any area of the city in order to wait, for example, for the infrastructure projects to be built, or for any other reason? Bruce, it's your turn.
Now blanket moratorium, I've been on the record to will consistently say no to that. I think all development needs to be looked at on a case-by-case basis. If the infrastructure is there and available to support it, then we look at that and we can go ahead with that. But it should not be a blanket moratorium. To me, blanket moratoriums, you can't turn that switch on and off. Look where we were at the end of the Great Recession. Unemployment. A lot of issues, and now look at where it's coming to fruition, where the jobs are out there and the building does take place. People are moving into South Florida. They're going to continue to move to South Florida. Figures show that 1,500 people a week come to the greater Fort Lauderdale, Miami metropolitan area. They come to this area. They're going to continue to come to this area for the quality of life and the climate and the jobs. So we're going to have to be able to mitigate and adapt to those things. And as we move forward, and I'm sure we'll touch on this later on, with our infrastructure improvements, which we're doing right now, and we'll talk about that some more, but we need to look at it on a case-by-case basis. I killed the Galleria project. I was against the Bahia Cabana project coming forward. I look at these things on a case-by-case basis. And what you see going on in downtown, by the way, was set in motion in the late 1980s by previous commissions with the Regional Activity Center. That is what's happening in the downtown area right now. And I support a high-density urban core.
Charlotte?
No one thinks that growth is a bad thing. Growth is going to happen in our city organically. Whether we like it or not, we have a beautiful city and people want to live here. I support a moratorium strictly from the fact that the infrastructure is crumbling. And I don't believe that the residents that live here today should have to pay for the residents of tomorrow. And I believe the residents of today should be able to flush their toilets without an issue, should not have sewage in their streets, should not have trucks driving all over the city from east to west dumping the sewage, and should be able to have fresh, clean drinking water that's not yellow. We had 17 boil water notices in the last year alone. When I was on the commission, we had one. That was 6 years ago. So just food for thought. Yes, a moratorium is going to happen, whether we initiate it or not. I say we take the lead, initiate it, and work with the development community to ask them and work with them to help pay for the infrastructure improvements that need to be done so it doesn't fall on the backs of the citizens that already live here. Thank you.
Thank you, Brittany. I think that a reality is starting to set into our community. I think that we're all very excited when the recession was over. There was a lot of new investment interest in our downtown and along different areas in our community. And I think we all took for granted that the infrastructure was also being addressed and was being repaired and was being kept in step with new development. We've now discovered that that's not the case. In fact, it's so bad that the state is breathing down our neck to say to us, you better do something or we're going to start fining you. Yes, we've had 22 million gallons worth of sewage flow into our streets and into our waterways. That is disgusting. So the question is, do we want a moratorium? I think it's time we put a pause on development. I think we really need to think, are we keeping in step with development when it comes to our infrastructure obligations? Obviously, we're not. It doesn't mean we're going to scare away the investment community. It doesn't mean we're going to slow down the pace of development. It means we owe our community the right to make sure that we are keeping the quality of life that we came here to live with to begin with. So I would say yes.
Thank you. Staying on the issue of infrastructure, all three of you either sit on or did sit on the city commission and we know that this problem with aging pipes has accumulated over a period of years. And what would you say to voters that are wrestling with the question of, well, who is accountable for this? And how can we trust that any one of you three will be sure that these $1.4 billion in work is completed before more neighborhoods are swamped with sewage, given the fact that it's only recently that there's been some urgency to the idea that these projects need to be done? Charlotte.
They knew about this problem a year ago when the consent order draft came down from the Florida Department of Environmental Protection. So it isn't something that's brand new. They also knew about it years ago when the pipe broke many, many, many times. When I was on the commission, we didn't have the issue. Of course, everything has gotten older. That would make perfect sense. But to not be proactive at it when you first hear about it and to drag on the amount of time it's taking to fix it is totally wrong. To have people that have sewage in their yards have to come in front of this commission and beg and plead for mitigation for their yard because they had sewage under their house is wrong. That is wrong. That's what a lot of people from Tarpon River had to do before they were able to get any funding from the city. And the city hid behind the sovereign immunity. Well, that's great, but this is an emergency. It's an emergency declaration. We have been mandated by a consent order to fix this. It's not something you can take lightly, and it should have been started a year and a half ago when the consent order came to this commission. Thank you.
Dean?
My turn?
Yes.
no one sitting here can say they were without blame. The reality is that the Reese report that came out last year said that this problem is going back for over a decade. And we've all sat on the commission within that decade. The problem is it has now been so neglected over the years that it is now forcing the state to make sure that we start to comply with the requirements of making sure our streets are in good repair, our water systems are in good repair. I agree. Hey, come on. We don't want to have dirty water coming out of our sinks, and we don't want to be able to go to our bathrooms one day and not be able to flush them. But the point is that blame is not really going to get us anywhere. So that question needs to be turned around and said, well, now that we know we have a problem, how are we going to fix it? Well, one of the ways we're going to fix it is to stop taking money out of the water and sewer fund every year and putting it in places where it doesn't belong. We need to balance our budget so that we don't have to take money out of water and sewer, out of our cemetery funds, or anywhere. We need to be smarter with our spending, and we need to find better ways in which to restore our infrastructure system. Thank you.
Actually, I agree with a lot of what Dean just said, which is, I think, a good thing. It's not a finger-pointing thing. It's let's get this job done, okay? And it does go way back. Actually, Charlotte never voted for a single budget. She was on the commission, so how are you going to fund things if you don't vote for a budget? So that's one issue. And looking back on the data as late as 2014 and 16, when we get biannual reports by engineering firms for our bonding agencies, and by the way, we have a double A plus bond rating on infrastructure, these reports never indicated to us that the system was as bad as it was. So we're acting on the information, the current commission acting on the information that it had at that particular point in time. And then all of a sudden, all hell breaks loose, and then we have the pipes bursting and tarping and that type of thing. So what I did at the end of August, in our joint workshop with the Budget Advisory Board the next afternoon with the Infrastructure Task Force, I put a city manager and city attorney on probation, because Dean's right. We had this information about these top priorities to get done. We didn't do it. We had some of those funded to start moving those line items out. It wasn't getting done. So I said, oh boy, I can't do this in 5 seconds, but anyway, we put them on probation. We're seeing progress. So 30% of our sewage in one line that went into the Tarpon River and through towards Dorsey into the Riverside Park, that's fixed, that's operating. By the way, that's why the trucks are out there, quite frankly, too. When you have an operation that size and an engineering project moving sewage and closing down a line that handles 30%, you've got to take it someplace else. That's what those trucks are about. And a lot of that's going to get FEMA reimbursed. I hope I get into that later. I'm sorry you can't do it in that short period of time. And it's not just for the sake of speaking.
No, Brittany, it's all your fault.
No, it's no, I was asked that the other night at the performance, and I said, it was your fault that time, Dean. But anyway, it's like it is. It's a job that needs to get done. We're getting it done, and not a finger-pointing thing. We need to get it done.
Thank you.
And I want to rebuttal the budget question.
Your
right.
name was mentioned.
Yes, thank you. The budget question. Well, let me tell you something. When you don't approve a budget, that means it goes back to the city manager, who is then supposed to sharpen his pencil and give you a budget that you will approve. No, I did not approve budgets because I didn't believe in paying the pension fund that we paid, the overtime that we paid, and some of the other expenses that we had, and it's all in there. One of my opponents did approve a budget that took out the ROI. The other one approved every single budget because it benefited the police and fire union and the pension obligation bonds. That's not something I do. I am very conservative when it comes to your finances and your money, and I will send that budget back as many times as required in order to get the budget that I want, that I think you can afford. Don't forget, $13 million hole in the budget, so they're not doing such a great job.
I think all of you have talked about ceasing the practice of removing funds out of the water sewer fund, and we know that that was done in order to keep the property tax rate the same for the last 9 or whatever years. If you were mayor, would we expect to see a property tax rate increase? Dean, I think it's your turn.
The answer is no. We have much better ways of handling our money than we seem to be doing today. The very fact that we have vacancies in our police department, I forgot the count now. At one point it was 57 spaces between sworn officers and civilian personnel. We have so many opportunities to find ways to try to hold the line and to tighten our budget. It makes absolutely no sense to raise our taxes. We have so many opportunities within our current spending. I mean, we're one of the richest cities in Florida, and yet we find ourselves taking money out of water and sewer funds, and like I said earlier, now our perpetual care fund is being threatened with $16 million. I mean, if I'm buried in Fort Lauderdale, I want to make sure the lawn is mowed. And that is threatened. So the answer to your question is, no, I would not be in favor of a tax increase.
I would keep all options on the table. At a Budget Advisory Board meeting that we talked about again with the infrastructure, I asked that we remove the ROI, and I got no support from the current commission, including Dean, who was sitting there. I offered solutions in cutting. In fact, one of the solutions in the current budget that I passed right now, with the caveat to the city manager that he not fill safety positions that are non-firefighter, paramedic, or non-public works positions. Even not filling police officer positions, I didn't fill first four that he asked for on that thing, because that equates to $1.9 million in salary savings, which can be repurposed, as Dean's talking about. But you have to pass the budget and get it done. You can set those priorities on the dais like that. So I would keep all options available. The ROI that we talked about in the past, we went into a couple of years ago, would have equaled about a $500,000 ad valorem raise at $16 million up to $20 million. I know we need to wean ourselves away from that, but I think we need to do it on a slower basis. I don't want to all of a sudden chop that block off and not have some type of funding. We can do it gradually is what I would think. But I would keep all options on the table, cutting, more revenue increases, fees, anything we can to make those budget priorities that we have.
Can I respond to that? Or do you want to wait till Charlotte? I'm just
You can
responding
respond.
a comment. Okay, just quickly. If there is any question about whether or not I supported the removal of $16 million from the Water and Sewer Fund, let it be known tonight that I voted against that. And I don't care when it came up, all I know is that the bottom line is when we voted on that budget, and I asked the city manager, why do we need this so-called return on investment? What have you not done right that we have to take from other funds in order to balance our budget? When I said to him, how can we better service the community with a more balanced and efficient budget, I was told that it couldn't be done, and that's why I voted against the budget this year. And especially when we're under a consent order. When you're under a consent order from the state that you have to be addressing your infrastructure needs, and we just voted in the face of that consent order and took the money out of the Water and Sewer Fund. So I just wanted to make sure that the history is clear of what went on here, and then I voted against taking out the Water and Sewer Fund money. Thank you.
Bruce, I think.
Well, because
Go ahead.
I think Charlotte was going to bring it up. Anyway, I just want to say, as far as what Dean mentioned, yeah, he voted against the budget this year, but he voted for ROI the past previous budgets he's sitting up there.
That's not true.
You voted for the budget.
The last one I did.
Okay, well, that's okay. You voted for it. That's my point.
4, I voted for 2.
Okay, so you
just
voted.
keep that in mind.
Okay, but you did.
Don't make up history.
I'm not. You did. I'm making a factual statement. You voted in favor of ROI within the budget. That's all I'm saying.
Thank you.
And let me tell you why I did, since you brought that up. Because in year 1, the first year I was here, I saw that ROI and I voted against it. I said, this is insane. Then the next year, the city managers told us, well, we need the money because our building department is falling behind. We can't get permits done. Developers are upset that these projects can't get forward. People that are trying to do repairs in their house have to wait 6 months before they get a building permit. So I said, okay, we'll let it go this year, okay? And the next year was the same thing. He said, we need the money to build up these departments because we're coming out of the recession. So I said, okay, we'll do it again this year. Then this past year, we're under a consent order from the state. He said, well, I need the money again. And I said, enough of this nonsense. You cannot balance our budget. You have no right to continue to drain those enterprise funds from where they're needed. And that's when I finally put my foot down. Because, let me just tell you something. It's not just voting against a budget for one single thing. When you vote against the budget, you're taking money away from children's services, you're taking money away from homelessness, you're taking money away from a lot of other things. So you try to balance all the interests that you can. So let's not focus on one or two things. Let's just remember
Okay.
that we have our
Wrap it
priorities.
up,
Thank you.
please.
Thank you, Britt.
Charlotte?
Can you repeat the question? Thank you.
I already answered it.
The question was, would you consider a property tax rate increase, since you're talking about ceasing the practice of, the budget has been balanced by removing funds from water sewer. If you stop doing that like you're proposing, are you going to raise property tax rates?
I don't believe the property tax rates need to be raised. The property taxes are raised just by the evaluation of your property, which has increased, and also new construction. So over $9 million has come into the city coffers because of those influences. The mismanagement or poor policy decisions to spend the money in the budget is really where the problem is. The overtime that's being spent. I will tell you that one of my opponents, even though he mentioned about the probation for the manager and for the city attorney, proceeded to give them a 3% raise. So which is it? Is it the 3% raise, or is it that they're not doing a good job? Because that's sort of a flip-floppy to me. The fact that they actually, some of them vote for the budget and some of them don't. Did you ever ask why you shouldn't vote for the budget, or what's causing the budget to be so out of whack, and get straight answers and do your due diligence and really work hard at trying to find out what really are the financial problems in the city? Years ago, the auditor had a 5-year strategic plan. A zero-based budgeting was going to be happening. Now, honestly, since I've left, I'm not sure that's being followed, but I want to make sure that you all know that this budget conversation going back and forth lies in the hands of the policy setters. They're the ones that can find out what's going on with the budget and how to solve it. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, new topic. Let's talk about the PAC advertising in this race. The city, a number of years ago, instituted very strict campaign contribution laws in order to prevent developers and others doing business with the city from using their money to have an undue influence on the city elections. So the city banned contributions from corporations. In order to contribute to a candidate's campaign, you have to be a human being, and they cut the contribution maximum in half. But two candidates in this race, Bruce and Dean, have acknowledged that they have PACs aiding their campaigns. PACs don't have to abide by the contribution limitations. They can take large sums, $10,000, from developers or entities that are doing business with the city. So what I would like to ask is, let's see, who are we starting with this time? It's Dean's turn. Dean,
I just went.
you said publicly last week that your PAC was just sharing ideas and was not attacking candidates. But now that I've seen the ads, most of them are just campaign ads for you, and one of them does attack Bruce Roberts. So are you responsible for the negative mailer, and why are you using PACs at all?
Well, the law that's been passed in the city of Fort Lauderdale says that you're allowed to give up to $250 a person, and it has to be an individual check. And that rule made sense for a while, but then the state has allowed political action committees to be formed to augment the practices of a particular candidate. What the political action committees do, obviously, they are independent, they're not part of my campaign, and their message is whatever. They don't advocate voting for Dean for mayor. They talk about my qualities, they talk about my qualifications, and they talk about maybe the things that I've said in other publications as far as what I feel the vision of the city is. So their content is all based on things that they come up with. Charlotte Rodstrom has talked about how she wrote herself a check for $50,000. I can't afford to write myself a check for $50,000. I'm happy that she's rich enough to do that, but most people, like myself, are not capable of doing that sort of thing. So candidates are allowed to augment their campaign financing through these methods, and so we take advantage of that. Thank you.
And as for the negative mailer?
As for the negative mailer, that was put out by the PAC, and that's the message, same messaging that they do about positive things, they do negative things, and that's their choice. The same with Bruce, all the negative campaigning. Well, actually, he admitted that he authorized those mailers, but that's another subject for another time.
Bruce?
Okay, as Dean indicated, PACs are legal in the state of Florida. We all use them. Charlotte has used them in the past also. She doesn't use them this time around, so we've all used PACs. I admit to that. And Dean, I'm going to ask you point blank. You will tell everybody here that you are not aware of that messaging in there. You had not seen that before or authorized or had anything to do with it.
But I'm not.
You
the
never said
final-
that, okay.
No,
All right.
I never said that. I
wanna
said
make-
I'm not the final word on what goes in those
Right, but
messages.
you're indicating, you're assuming or trying to indicate that you had nothing, that I had more hands-on, that type of thing like that. I think that the PACs speak for themselves. I just
Yeah,
want to get that
But
clear.
did you also authorize the messaging in the PAC mailings that you put out?
Yeah, because I thought your veracity is a question. If you look at the things that are in there,
Well,
it's like, for example, you say that you're against one of us is out there says you're against the fact that you was a rich contract of the police for all the unions that got the same contract. Yet at a commission meeting, you're trying to give yourself a 50% pay raise, but you're against the pay raise for all of our
Whoa, whoa,
employees.
whoa, 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 whoa,
You
whoa.
did. You brought that up. Hey, let me finish. You can rebut.
You got 5 seconds.
Okay. But I would like him to, I would like him to answer directly, more specifically, as to his knowledge and the content and participation in his PAC publications. I admit to mine.
Dean?
So, let's talk about that snide comment that I want to give myself a raise. The reality is that the city commissioners get $30,000 a year and the mayor gets $35,000. No one's going to get rich on that. Trying to give a raise, the point of wanting to give the raise was not to enrich myself, but was to encourage other people who cannot afford to serve in public office, teachers, police officers even, people who can't hold down 2 jobs because of the nature of their job. And they may want to serve in public office. Look at District 1. We had 1 candidate running there. 1 candidate. Look in District 4. 2 of the candidates came from outside of the town to run for our city. So, hey, they may have great qualifications, but the reality is we need to be able to encourage people to who need to earn a living wage to be able to run for city office.
But
and
to
not
the
have-
point, Dean,
That's the point.
were you aware of the content of all of the PAC ads that supported your campaign so far?
Absolutely. And just as Bruce was aware of the attack ads for me, showing that I'm wearing makeup and lipstick, how offensive is that, everybody? That is absolutely wrong. That should never, ever have happened. I never demeaned you as a person. I never would ever do that to anybody, and you should be ashamed of yourself that you brought that content into our election.
Bruce, I'll let you respond to that.
Okay, Dean, first of all, it's on a puppet, it's not on you. The other aspect of it is, if you look at my record, because you're...
puppet just has to have my
Let me
face on
finish.
it.
You can come back. Well, it did. But anyway, let me just say that if you look at my record, he's implying that I'm homophobic, and I brought this up in the last meeting at the commission meeting when we had the debate with the Sun Sentinel. Look at my record. I was a swing vote on this city commission to pass a resolution to support the Marriage Equality Act before it became federal law. I also passed an ordinance and initiated an ordinance to further strengthen strengthen the purchasing ordinance against anti-discrimination for all people. I did that. My record in the police department, if you look at the rank and file in this police department, you look at across the board, there's no discrimination against anybody for gender, for a sexual preference, or any of those issues. And I'm proud of that record. So please look at the record and go above all this type of thing. Did that offend some people? I'm finding out it did. For that, I apologize. But it was never intended to go that route in that regard. It was meant to attack the veracity of Dean Trentalis.
Thank you. Charlotte,
Which,
your
by the
turn.
way, somehow got lost in that messaging, because I don't know what it is that you thought I lied about, but whatever.
Charlotte?
Well, boy, am I glad I don't have a PAC.
Well, Charlotte,
Not-
This is what
not
it's all
anymore,
about
Charlie.
this go
You used to
around.
have a PAC.
But this is what it's about this go around. It's obviously not something you want to venture into. But what was the question about the PAC?
well, since you aren't involved in the PAC advertising, maybe you could address why your advertising lays the blame for the city's heavy development and infrastructure problems on your opponents when you served on this same city commission during the time that these troubles were, growing.
The infrastructure or the overdevelopment? Because I didn't vote for any of the overdevelopment. Matter of fact, I used to be known as the anti-development commissioner. So that I did not do. The infrastructure, we addressed something in the Waterworks 2011 when I first arrived on the commission. That was wrapping up. I had a little problem with that because it was over budget. That did spend money on the 5 Ash, on the Lohmeyer and the Peel Dixie to improve those facilities. It did not spend money on all the distribution lines. They have a schematic of what was fixed and what was changed out and what was not. The septic tanks were changed out to hook to sewers so that development could happen in a lot of the residential areas. It was to help the developers and to help move the city forward. The problem is it's the distribution lines from point A to point B that were never fixed correctly. There is a map on the city's website that shows you what was neglected and what wasn't, and some of the maps, some of the actual lines, they don't even know how old they are. So I would start there to start fixing those lines and to go and check and see what was going on with those who got them done. Does that answer your question about the back?
Yes,
Oh,
thank you.
okay.
I'm going to move to another topic that I've seen come up at every forum that I've attended and a lot of communications from voters, and that is about the late-night votes on controversial issues here in this chamber. A lot of Fort Lauderdale meetings draw crowds. Mayor Seiler has had very liberal public input policies. He does not limit, even if there's 100 people here, everybody still gets their 3 minutes, and consequently, some of the votes take place at 2 or 3 in the morning. However, it's not always because there was a single item that lasted for 7 hours like Bahia Mar. Sometimes it's simply because the agenda is packed with several controversial items, and you could predict just by looking at the agenda that some of these hot topics are going to be voted on after, on the next day, essentially. So if you were mayor, would you change this, and how?
Yeah, I definitely think we go overboard too late, and I would change that. I think we need to be able to have more meaningful meetings by not having such long agendas. The HMR is an aberration, quite frankly, because you indicated, Brittany, I don't think we stopped getting, by the time we started that hearing around 7 o'clock, we didn't stop getting public input until about 1 o'clock in the morning. And so you have to get that public input, and you have to continue that type of agenda. But would I have 2 or 3 of those things on the same agenda in the future? No. I'm also more in favor of having things like workshops and public meetings like that to deal with a singular item to get the input and to do a better hearing. So I don't like staying up that late in the morning either. I'm not too good the 2 days afterwards. The day after it, I'm okay, but 2 days later, I don't know where I am. I wouldn't write a check or do anything serious, make any decisions. So having said that, yes, I would definitely change that and that practice.
And support adding meetings.
I would support adding meetings, definitely, without a doubt.
Charlotte.
Well, first of all, no one did anything about it for the last 7 to 9 years, and as a citizen who comes down and advocates for projects, against projects that hurt the quality of life of our population, I have to tell you that there's nothing enjoyable about sitting here until 3:30 in the morning on the large items. The fact that the large items on the agenda are placed on the back of the agenda at the public hearing is totally wrong. The public hearing needs to be first. Right after people get off of work, they need to come right down and go to the public hearing, and they need to be able to speak so that they can get home in a certain decent hour. If it's a project, which you should know if you have the pulse of the people, that Bahia Mar is a specific project. It's very intense. You should know that giving away public land is like that. You should know that the Galleria project was a big one, and several of the other projects that go to 2 or 3 in the morning. If that's the case, you should have a special meeting just for those agenda items, and then continue with your good and welfare and the rest of your agenda on another Tuesday. I would advocate for separate meetings for large agenda items that are controversial, and I would have to say you should know those going into it, and the commission is the one that can set the agenda and make sure that that doesn't happen, and they have not done that yet. So I would like to see that going forward, and I would definitely change that. Thank you.
Thank you. Dean?
Thank you, Brittany. I think that we all got shaken up the last couple of years, especially this past year with the late night meetings. What really bothered me once was when a senior citizen came here and stayed till 1:30 in the morning and went home, and when she got out of the elevator, she fell, she broke something, and within 2 weeks she died. And it was a tragic moment, I think, in our community to think that people have to suffer through that just to have their voice heard. So what does that tell you? It tells you that we have a commission that really isn't listening to its people. Because if it was listening to its people, people wouldn't have to come out here in droves speaking against an item. We need to have these things resolved ahead of time. We need to listen to our people. Now, should there be a controversial matter that does take us late, I believe that we should experiment like other cities have, like Oakland Park, where they end the meetings at 11 or 12 and take them to the next day. We should never have meetings last past midnight, and I would encourage my commission to work together to try to agree to those types of rules. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. I have to get to the topic. I have to ask about the homeless because so many people wanted to hear your thoughts on this problem that the Fort Lauderdale has had for years. And over the years, I know we've heard a lot about, let's have enforcement, and then there was the bulldozer in Stranahan Park, and there was the feeding ordinance, and people saying, let's open the stockade, and it's the county that gets the money, and they're really supposed to be the ones taking care of the problem. And yet, there's really been no visible progress in removing the homeless camp at the main library. So what, as mayor, would you do differently to address this? Yes.
I would make sure there's plenty of resources dedicated to the homeless situation. You're right when you say that nothing has really been done. As a matter of fact, when they went from the Stranahan Park, I believe something happened with this commission where they ended up sitting all out in front of the commission. This is a group of people that I like to say live off the grid. They are the ones that are having the most problems of anyone else. So if you don't dedicate enough resources to them, you will never solve this problem. Working closely with the county would be something that we definitely need to do. Right now, the county and the city doesn't get along, so that's a problem right off the bat. I think with the new commission, since we've been going to all these debates and having all these public forums, you can be assured that the new people that get elected are going to do something about the homeless. This comes up at every meeting. It's something we see every day in our downtown. So I would think the next commission that gets on board with the leadership of perhaps myself, I hope, would address this problem and rectify the situation in a humane, caring, but determined way. Thank you.
Thank you. Dean?
Thank you, Brittany. When I returned to the commission in 2013, I convened a roundtable discussion with over 20 stakeholders, ACLU, Homeless Assistance Center representatives, you name it. Everybody connected with the homeless issue came to this meeting. The city manager showed up. City manager sat on his phone the entire time texting people. Meetings after that, I brought up to the commission, we need to be committed to those folks who can't help themselves. We can't just rely on state and federal funding. We need to commit municipal funding. We don't commit our own funds to helping the homeless. What does that mean, helping the homeless? It's not just money. It's knowing how to help those who can't help themselves. So to talk about the stockade up near the Extreme Action Park, we need to get back with the county and make sure that we can work together to open up that facility and bring a home to those folks who need to remove themselves from Stranahan Park and go there. We can provide feeding services, mental health care. We can provide addiction services. Get people back on their feet. People don't want to be homeless. They just need a helping hand. Thank you.
But just to ask a follow-up, you would force these homeless people to go to the stockade?
Well, the law doesn't allow you to force anybody, so let's understand that. But if we don't have a place for them, then how can we possibly remove them from their public location? So the law says if you provide a location for them, if you have a bed for their head, then you can participate in a program that will bring them to that place. That's a lesson we learned from Miami-Dade.
Requiring them to go to that place?
Requiring them to go to that place, yes.
Thank you. Bruce?
Yeah, I've dealt with this homeless issue for a long time. During my tenure with the police department, we used to have a homeless camp at the George English Park. I think some of you have been here remember that. Then we moved the encampment over here to the heliport downtown in the parking lot there. That was a mess. I mean, that was crime, rapes, murders, drug dealing going on there. That had to be eliminated. What we're dealing with right now are 387 at last count chronic homeless, most of which are the downtown. And the solution is, which touched on by each of my opponents, partly is that solution is to meet with the county in a more vigorous attempt to partner with the county to develop those resources needed to address that issue. As your mayor, I've said in other forums that I will be having quarterly meetings with the county commission, not annual meetings with the county commission, to start to to attack this particular issue and other issues that we need to deal with on the county on a more regular basis. We do work with the faith-based organizations to try to alleviate the homeless thing, with Hope South Florida and the other groups like that. In fact, most of the veteran homelessness has been eliminated in this particular area, but we are dealing with 387 chronic homeless, and a lot of those resources are out of our control. There's state resources and county resources, and the funding for mental health and social issues are abysmal within the state of Florida. That is the problem. So we need to be able to work with our state legislators and our lobbyists up in the Tallahassee to get the appropriate funding to deal with that. We cannot do it on our own as a municipality. We need a lot of partners to be able to deal with that particular issue. And that's why it hasn't gone away. It has not gone away all these years that I've seen it out there. 387 chronic are still there. And by the way, having a jail downtown doesn't help either, because other municipalities bring their prisoners in there, they're released on the street, and where do they stay? They stay in our downtown area. So we have a lot of work to do, and it's frustrating to me after all these years of seeing it happen like that too, and not making any headway, but we will keep attacking that issue.
Thank you. Okay, I'm going to ask one final question, and then I'll give you the opportunity to give a short wrap-up. The last question is very general. It comes from one of the voters. Without using party labels, because this is a nonpartisan race, how do you describe yourself politically? Whoever's turn it is.
Oh, it's mine.
You want me to go first?
I think it's you.
You want to get, how do we, is this our?
Whoever's turn it was.
No,
this
this is the question, then we get to close.
Oh, okay, okay.
Right?
This is a question, yes.
Okay, how do we describe ourselves politically?
Yes.
I've been consistently a person that believes in progressive values, as well as at the same time conservative fiscal mentality. We need to tighten our belts in this community, and the only way we're going to do that is by working together to find which are the best places to spend our money and stop squandering it in ways we have over the past decade. So the reality is that in trying to maintain that perspective, we still need to reach out and hold ourselves open to those people who cannot help themselves. So I firmly believe in progressive values, helping those, equality, fairness, and I believe that we can do that at the same time while we know how that we're spending our money in the right way. Thank you.
Bruce?
Yeah, from a political standpoint, I don't view myself politically, and I'm not, and I try to be, to accomplish the vision that's set out for the city that all of you created many years ago. That's where I come from, and that vision has to be a vision of fairness to everybody involved, and as we talk in our mantra, it's one of our vision statements, by the way, no neighborhood left behind. So we've got a lot of work in that regard. We've done a lot of work in that regard. All of these things are non-political. I've always said there's nothing political about law enforcement, nothing political about the infrastructure, nothing political about everything that we do with all the parks we've opened up in the past 9 years. We've opened up, I think, 17 new parks and refurbished 25 parks in the city of Fort Lauderdale. That's an achievement. And those are things that cut across the board for the quality of life for everybody. So it's how do we establish a quality of life for everybody in a fair, non-discriminatory way and bring those resources that are badly needed. Some places need more help than others, and we can do that. So it's a kind of trying to level the playing field across the board to enhance the quality of life for the city of Fort Lauderdale.
Thank you. Charlotte, how do you describe yourself politically?
I was going to say, thank you for asking that question again, since we seem to get a little bit off track on some of the answers. I can tell you right now that I am extremely financially conservative, and you can check my record, and you can see the way that I vote. I'm very careful because you work very hard for your money, and I am in charge of spending it on your behalf, and I want to make sure that you know that I'm transparent, ethical, and careful with your tax dollars and the money that you make. I am socially liberal. I don't believe in getting into anybody's bedroom with them, and I do like to have...
John's, right?
Whoa, okay. I'm not even going to go there. This is like the pillow talk conversation people used to have when he was on the county and I was at the city, which, by the way, worked out really great for the county and city when we were both serving at the same time, unlike today. But I am socially liberal, physically conservative, and socially liberal, and that's where I stand, and you could check the record and check me out. I wish you would, www.charlotterodstrom.com. If you have any questions, give me a call, and I'll save the rest for my closing statement. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, now each candidate will have 2 minutes for a closing statement. We'll start with Bruce.
Okay, I'm here, obviously, we're all here asking for your vote. I want to be your next mayor. I've served this city for 35 years on our police department, 6.5 as your police chief. I'm finishing up 9 years as a city commissioner representing District 1. My DNA is public service. In fact, I'll go back to where we talk about my whole family's like that. My father's a retired colonel he moved down here, our family back in the 60s. By the way, there was cows grazing at Dixie Commercial back then. Those days are long gone. My mother was a teacher. My daughter is a police lieutenant. My son works in the U.S. State Department. That's our service. That's my family background. And we've started a lot of good things here in the city of Fort Lauderdale. We have some headwinds to address, and we'll address those headwinds. But I think you need somebody who has demonstrated leadership over the course of his time, not only with the police department, but on the city commission. I'm proud of the endorsements that I have, and I think that's what brings the leadership together. I have the endorsements of the FOP, the firefighters, the CFLCA, the Builders Association. I have the political endorsements from our current mayor, from Commissioner Rodstrom, from former Senator Chris Smith, and many other endorsements. That's what I think those demonstrate that I have the ability to bring people together to accomplish a goal that we need to accomplish. And that goal is our vision. That vision is what we talked about. A lot of you in here established that vision for 2035, and we need to revisit that vision, is what we need to do. That's 5 years old. So as your mayor, I will reconvene those charrettes in those meetings to re-examine where we went with that original vision, purpose and desire, and come forward and redo that. That's going to be key, because what we do, what a mayor does and what a commission does for you, is try to enact that vision that you have for the city of Fort Lauderdale. And that's one of the top priorities we're going to have. Without a vision, you can't budget accordingly or specifically. You can't do things on just a 3-2 vote. You need to have a vision to go forward. And I think a lot of you in this room participate in that vision as I look out. And I'm looking forward to bring that back together again. So I demonstrate a leadership ability to, I'm not a finger pointer, I'm somebody that gets things done. You look at our webpage and our site, you look at my past record, you'll see that it's a record of accomplishment in bringing people together. Thank you very much.
Just a quick correction. The mayor that's endorsing Bruce is not Mayor Rodstrom.
No, if I said that, I obviously made a mistake, so that's why.
I just wanted to let you know, my husband is not supporting you. Thank you very much.
I'm going to take your time away, but I'm looking out here, I'm saying, you know what? I just said something pretty silly, because I'm looking at everybody laughing out there, and I said, okay, what did I just do?
And I thought it was really silly.
It was, so thank you for correcting the record. Mayor Sire.
I won't hold it against you, okay?
I know that, but thank you for correcting the record, Charlotte.
Go ahead, Charlotte, with your closing. Okay.
All right, I want to make sure that you all know this evening that I am not hard and nasty or finger pointing because I want to be. That's not it at all. I am different than the gentlemen that are sitting here. I've been on the dais and I've been back as a civic activist, so I've seen both sides of how it works. And, you know, transparency, being ethical, being honest, and being trustworthy is something that I aspire to be on a daily basis. I think the commission needs to change, and it needs to radically change. And I don't mean by just voting for the first female mayor that we've had in 100 years or the second female mayor. I mean by putting people in the position that are going to look out after you, after your tax dollars, after your well-being, after every single thing that you stand for in our city. I've lived here for 60 years. I've raised my 3 children here. I have 2 of them living here in Fort Lauderdale. I have a grandbaby, a little girl, and I couldn't be more delighted. But I want to make sure her future, like our future, is set in something that is sustainable, resilient, and that we can be proud of. So I'm sorry, I'll apologize in advance if I seemed a little bit angry at my fellow candidates up here, but I am. And that anger is what gave me the passion to run for office in the first place. And I think we can make a difference, and I think we can make a change. And I think we can be the Fort Lauderdale that we all moved here to live and to enjoy and to be part of a group together. So that's what I bring to the City Commission, the opportunity to have change and to have something better than what we have. And if they take it as being something, I'm just showing you the differences. This is the last debate we're going to have. So it is important for me to make sure that you know all about me before you go cast your ballot. Maybe you've already cast your ballot, and I hope it was for me. But I'm Charlotte Rodstrom, and I am serious about running for this job to be your next mayor. Thank you.
Thank you. Dean.
Thank you so much. First of all, we are into a new year. Happy New Year, everybody. I hope we all enjoy good health and prosperity in the months ahead. Why did I get into this race? what was the point of wanting to run for mayor? Sitting on the dais in this commission right over here in this chair, meeting after meeting, it's very, very frustrating when I hear people like yourselves coming here late into the night, begging this commission to make decisions that the people want. Hey, we have a wonderful city. We are a wonderful tourist destination. We are a place where people, the yachting community is a magnet in Fort Lauderdale. We have a real estate industry that is thriving. But is that sustainable into the next century? Is that kind of workforce what we can look forward to? Our young folk who grow up here and go to other cities, what do? They leave here and they never come back. We need to focus on the economic development that's going to be sustainable for the future of our young people. We need to apply ourselves to make sure we have affordable housing, that we diversify our economy, because it's these types of things that are going to maintain the sustainability of Fort Lauderdale. Otherwise, we'll be obsolete. And how do we do that? We do that by listening to the people. How many charrettes, how many visioning sessions, how many times have we met and we catalog these things into books and they sit on shelves? When we have opportunities to comply with the visioning of the people and we just completely ignore it, that's not how you run a city. We need to listen to the people. We need change in this community. We need to make sure that the voices of the people are heard, and we need to say we are going to make sure this is a place for our young. And is that it?
You can finish your
We
sentence.
need to make sure that our young people have a home when they think of Fort Lauderdale, and that's the type of mayor that I want to be. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, candidates.
Thank you, Brittany, appreciate it.
Thank you. We are going to move on to District 2 now. And just some applause for the mayoral candidates again. Thank you very much.
You too. Good to see you guys. You can run by. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Yes.
Oh, he's going to take a picture, sir, sorry.
I have a call.
Okay, all right.
All right, District 2, you're going to share 3 microphones. Thank you.
Any particular order?
I thought it was a good...
No, however you want to.
Oh, yeah, I don't know if
Thank you.
Yes, please do.
I'm going to... Randy.
Anywhere you want.
Just to tell Dean thanks.
And we are still right on time.
Come on.
We have 5 candidates in this race and 3 microphones, so
Okay.
we'll see how collegial they are when that's time to pass the mic.
Pass the mic.
This is District 2,
Chad should have his own mic. Sit.
which
Yeah.
I've always called it the Bermuda Triangle of political districts. Yes. But starting at the far end, we have Tim Smith, Chad Maxey, George Castrotaro, Steve Glassman, and Lester Zalewski. Let's see. The beach residents up here are Lester and Steve. George and Chad live in Lake Ridge, and Tim lives in Middle River Terrace. We're right on time, and this segment is going to run to 8:30 because we have so many candidates. And I'm going to start right off with probably the biggest issue in this district is the perceived, quote, overdevelopment. We got a lot of questions posed by people who feel that the development has gone too far. And you all have different track records when it comes to development, so I'm going to sort of tailor the question differently for each candidate. But starting I'm going to start at the far end because this one will take me the longest.
It's going to
Tim.
take the longest, is that what you think? Your question,
That's
or?
the question, yes.
Okay.
You know, Tim was a city commissioner who I covered because I've been covering the city on and off for, you know, almost 20 years. Tim, you have a background advocating for development for your neighborhood, and you're also involved in real estate investment. When you sat on the commission, you voted for a lot of high-rises that came before you. I remember when you ran for mayor, Noggle had his ads saying "Towers for Tim." What would you say to voters who think the city is overdeveloped, and can you name a major project that you voted against?
Thank you, Brittany. And before I answer that, I wanted to thank the Council of Civic Associations for holding this. Nobody said that yet, but you guys are a really important group. That's why I wore this T-shirt tonight. When I came to the council in 1993, when Middle River Terrace was a disaster, they helped me, they mentored me. Even Dennis Ulmer, this last one still breathing from that first meeting. And we went back and we started painting murals on our convenience stores. This was the first one we painted. It's still there today. I'm very proud of it. It's a real symbol in our neighborhood, no graffiti. And my sweet wife, 40 years, was in the room. I said, "This is why I'm going to wear it. What do you think?" She said, "Take it off." Once again, I didn't listen to her. Overdevelopment. We are overdeveloped in some parts of the city, and we are underdeveloped in some parts of the city. I think everybody agrees with that. The Sistrunk Corridor, it needs redevelopment. I'm in favor of redevelopment. My neighborhood still needs redevelopment. The beach should not have any more condominiums on it. We should stop that. The downtown, we have to continue with our dream of making the downtown one of the best in the country.
And can you name a major project that you did not support?
I voted against the Atlantic on the beach.
Thank you. Chad, what would you say to voters who think that the city is overdeveloped?
I think what we have in our situation with our city is we have areas that clearly have been overdeveloped, or else we wouldn't have the sewage problems that we're having in breaking in these streets. But I also agree that the city can't continue to stop growing. There are areas that do continue to need to be developed, especially on the west side, and we have a significant part of that, which is our district. I also believe in what's called inclusionary zoning. I think as our city grows, we got to make sure that we don't turn in our city into a brickle, where not only have they moved out the lower income class, but they've also moved out the middle class. If you don't make six figures, you can't live there. And that can happen in the city. We already have rising rental rates that are pushing out young people that have wanted to move here, pushing out other people that want to have lived here for a long time. And we need to make sure that we're creating set-asides that actually address this issue in our city with our major developments, and that's the way that we can make sure we maintain this incredible diversity as we move forward with our city.
George, what would you say to voters who feel that the city is overdeveloped?
Well, I think that the key is what voters would say to me. I think what happened with BMR as an example was just a travesty in the sense that the voters were so clear in their consensus and their feedback to the city that they weren't in favor of that project, yet it managed to go forward. So I think smart development is critical in the sense of listening to the residents of the city and not necessarily to the developers who have vested interests. A city of our size can't grow, it can't develop without strategic development. I think Chad has some really good ideas as it relates to affordable housing. One of my platform points is to make affordable housing a reality for the city of Fort Lauderdale. I served on the county's housing council for several years, and it became very evident to me that there is a lack of affordable housing for people in Fort Lauderdale. By and large, there's opportunities for lower income families to some extent, and there is a lot of higher income opportunities, but the middle income opportunities are very, very difficult for new and young people to afford to purchase homes, and so we have to make sure our downtown development, our beach development recognizes that fact as well.
Steve, you focused a lot on fighting development for historic preservation purposes. What would you say to a developer who's voting in this election? Why should they support you?
Thank you, and thank you to the council. I would say to the developer, and actually I have a lot of developer support, believe it or not, because what the developers learned when I was president of the Central Beach Alliance for 7 years was I changed the direction of that organization. We used to have a reputation of being against every single thing that happened on the beach. But what my philosophy was work with the community, be a consensus builder, and make projects better. And that's what we did. We actually started to work with developers. I was very proud of the fact that while I was in the leadership position of the Central Beach Alliance, we actually got the city to require that development projects go to the neighborhoods so that the neighborhoods had a chance to weigh in. And Brittany, I want to say that I don't believe that historic preservation and development are mutually exclusive. Cities like Miami Beach, other educated cities, they know what it is to save the footprint of a historic structure and then just simply add on to it so that you are retaining your history at the same time you are building something new.
Thank you. Lester, what would you say to voters who believe that the city is overdeveloped?
I would say like the mic. District 2 is a very broad district. If you're living in a specific portion of it, you tend to have a very close connection to that portion. In some locations, the development in terms of being overdeveloped should be developed in a better manner. In some locations, there is no development whatsoever. So it's a balanced approach. You have to have a balanced approach. The word development is not negative. As some of your mayoral candidates stated, you simply cannot finance the city on the current tax base with all the obligations that the city holds. So several years back when I ran for this position, one of my points was basically the budget. And the budget had a couple of ways that it could basically support itself and support the community and support the work base that we had here in terms of all the employees of the city. One was simply increasing the property values, which is occurring, and our budget is basically being stabilized by that portion. And number two is to bring in additional revenue by taking all the lots that are basically empty in some of the communities and putting something on there that produces jobs as well as a tax base.
Thank you. Chad, this one's going to start with you and hinging on this, the same issue. The question of a moratorium that has come up, I want to ask about that. Do you candidates support a temporary moratorium on approval of development projects for any reason in any part of the city if you are elected? Chad?
I think the challenge with moratoriums is, it's not like a light switch, then you can't turn it on and off. And I think that, as you can see, the mayor's race and the new commission have heard the voters. And they have heard that, overdevelopment has occurred too much. And so we need to take a tactical pause in the areas where our infrastructure can't handle it, on the east side and on the beach, and we need to make sure that we're doing it. But I don't support...
So, excuse me, a tactical pause being a moratorium, or how would you achieve that?
No, I think we achieve that through the city commission zoning process. And we say no to projects that are too dense for those locations. But if somebody wants to redevelop their house, if somebody wants to tear down and fix that also falls under those definitions. So I do not believe that we should look at a moratorium.
Thank you. George?
I think a moratorium would send the wrong message to our citizens and to people who might have an interest in coming to our city. I think, as I explained earlier, an approach to smart growth means looking at each building by building, case by case, identifying the needs in that particular area, getting the feedback of the citizens that are going to be affected most by it, and collectively coming to a decision that would best represent the combined interest of all the parties affected.
Thanks. Steve?
Yes, thank you. I think a point that we're missing with the word moratorium is the fact that there are so many projects in the pipeline right now, thousands of units. If we actually did take a pause to make sure that we had an infrastructure plan, guess what? No one would even notice that there was a moratorium. There are thousands of units coming. So I don't know why we're so afraid of that pause. I think the developer community would understand, first of all, they're working to do what they're doing now. And if you notice, so many of these projects that have been approved, they don't seem to be starting. Anyone remember Marina Lofts and that drama that was created in this room by the development community? The rain tree and the overdevelopment that people were furious about? Where is that? And I can list so many more, even in the downtown area, that have not happened. So I don't think we need to be afraid of the word, because no one's going to notice if there is one.
Lester?
Excuse me. Can I do a rebuttal on the pause, because obviously that was my word?
Sure, okay.
Again, I think there would be people that suffered from a pause. If you went anywhere west of the railroad tracks, you'd know that there are people that actually do need development, and they can't wait, and they can't have a pause on that side of the city.
We're not talking about West.
But you did mention a tactical pause yourself, Chad.
Right, in areas where infrastructure cannot support it.
Okay.
And we can do that through the commission zoning process. Absolutely.
Lester?
Thank you.
A moratorium. Well, that's a great question. And the first question I have to that question is, well, how do we define it? Do we define it as a 30-day, 60-day, 1 year, 2 years? Does it apply to the people that already have their permits? Does it apply to people that are applying for the permits? So before I get into that whole moratorium thing, I say absolutely yes, but first let's define it. So if we have a pause for the new commission and the new mayor to review the city staffers, because we as commissioners and as the mayor, we would not literally sit down on our own and go through every piece of paper and every permit that's been issued. That's just not our job. Our job is to be a board, as in a corporate world, the board of directors, and to oversee the staff of the city. So the answer to that would be, I would need a clear definition of what the moratorium would be, or I personally would present a clear definition of what the moratorium would be, and then I would move forward.
Okay, thank you. Tim?
Yes, sometimes a moratorium is necessary. I'm the only commissioner that ever served that I know of that was successful in getting a moratorium put in place in the city. In the year 2000, the beach was on fire. All those towers that Brittany talked about, they were coming fast and furious. I just felt as though if we didn't stop, take that pause, but a legal one called a moratorium, that things were going to get overdeveloped. So we did. We took a 6-month, Lester, 6-month moratorium. We stopped the building. We changed the rules. Everything had to be 20 feet shorter. The setbacks had to be increased. We needed larger trees. The FAR was changed. And then, once we reopened building, I say then get out of the way. You can't have it both ways. You change the rules to what you think are appropriate, and then you tell the development community, okay, you can build a 200-foot building, not a 300-foot building, and then you get out of the way and let them do it. You can't then continue to stop them. That's not fair. So yes to moratorium, but once the rules are in place, let things happen.
Thank you. Okay, George, this next question starts with you. One of your campaign ads says it's important to have LGBT representation on the city commission. So I'd like to ask all of the candidates, and starting with George, who this is his ad, to answer, how would each of you rate this current city commission's handling of LGBT issues, and what, if anything, needs to be done differently?
Well, I think the LGBT community represents a very, very large portion of the city of Fort Lauderdale, which is what prompted me to include that in my advertisement. As far as the existing commission and its mayor, I think that the city could have taken a much more proactive approach to issues that impact the LGBT community. Marriage equality was an example where Fort Lauderdale made national news in a fairly unfavorable way, because our city chose to ignore the feedback of its constituents as it related to marriage equality. That's something that across the country was sweeping forward so quickly, and here in Fort Lauderdale was treated so backwards. Additionally, our city's policies in dealing with vendors as it relates to procurement, just across the board, there are ways that our city could be more proactive in addressing the interest of the LGBT community. And I think my reflection and my interest in the LGBT community is most recently acknowledged by Equality Florida, who recently gave me their endorsement, as it related to the campaign.
Thank you. Steve?
Yes, thanks. Just a quick correction, George, because actually the city commission passed the resolution for marriage equality before it was law, 3-2. The mayor and Romney Rogers voted against that resolution. The other 3 commissioners actually voted for it, so just a quick correction on that one. But besides that, 3-2 is still disgraceful. I thought that was too too close a vote, and I was unhappy. I actually testified that evening in City Hall urging them to pass that resolution. I'm also not happy with the fact that the procurement process is really not codified. It's simply a policy, and I think that should be codified by ordinance so that there are non-discrimination clauses written in the ordinances. And lastly, I was very pleased to see today in Broward County that our county banned countywide conversion or reparative therapy, which for those of you that don't know what that is, that's the practice of mental health professionals and other health professionals actually working mostly with young people to change their sexual orientation. And our county government voted unanimously to ban that practice. I would like to see our city commission follow suit and do that as well, as other cities have done, like Oakland Park and Wilton Manors.
Right, because I think the county ban is just for the unincorporated areas.
Correct.
Lester?
Can I respond to just to...
Oh, yes, absolutely.
Having litigated pro bono one of the most advanced marriage equality cases in the state, I'm just responding specifically to Steve's comment. The city of Fort Lauderdale did absolutely nothing. Most cities issued amicus briefs. The city of Miami, Miami Beach, Orlando, all of these cities voluntarily submitted amicus briefs to support the marriage equality. The city of Fort Lauderdale did not. They may have actually just stood sort of on the side idly. So I don't agree. They may have had a vote 3 to 2, but they did nothing with that vote.
Okay. Lester?
First of all, to me, these issues in this state and this age should be really simple. Discrimination of any nature is against the Constitution. It's against the principles of our way we live. Then that's the bottom line. It's like if someone is being discriminated at, there's a legal issue that's already on the books that will correct it, approach it from that point of view right off the bat. Second of all, the conversations that we're engaged here as proposals that a city or county does that encourages a social viewpoint and has no weight to it. The weight is in the law. And the law says we cannot discriminate against anyone for any reason. I think we've come to that point in our civilization in the United States where we all understand that, as simple as it is.
Tim?
I like Lester's answer. The truth is, I don't think we need a gay person on the commission. But if we vote in anybody that is homophobic or a racist or a bigot, shame on us. And we cannot do that. The gays have been so instrumental in District 2 particularly.
The gays?
Yeah.
Well,
Steve, I guess he wanted to interject the gays. You know, the gay people. That's what I call them, LGBT. They've been so instrumental, like you, Steve, at the beach and others. So my brother-in-law was nearly killed in a gay bashing in the 80s. He left a bar, minding his own business, and got beat with a baseball bat. He was in the hospital for months. My wife and I signed on to helping that fight. When the Boy Scouts were in the city and wouldn't allow gays to join that organization, I led the effort to fight it. And all over the country, I got calls and death threats and things. So, no, we do not need a gay person, George. What we need is people that judge people on the content of their character and nothing else.
Brittany, if I could respond.
Okay, please do.
My ad simply said that the gay community needed a voice. It didn't say that a person needed to be gay to be on the commission. And I think there's a big distinction there.
yeah.
I thought Brittany's question was that did we need an LGBT person on the commission? So George, I agree with your observation, and I'm sure you agree with mine as well.
I don't think you do. I'm not going to comment any further.
Tim, quit while you're ahead, Tim. Quit while you're ahead.
You think that's Chad?
Yes. I think, to Lester's point, I wish the law was enough. I quite frankly wish the law was enough. But if the law was enough, We'd have solved racism in this country. We'd have solved discrimination against the LGBTQ community in this country. We'd have solved all that stuff a long time ago, but unfortunately, the law is not enough. And so you have to have an advocate, and I agree with that. We do need to have an advocate for the community, because that's what contributes to the diversity, which is the strength of this city. And I will tell you that, when I look at the LGBTQ community and what they provided our city, not just, with diversity, but also the economic generator that they are. I mean, we're a destination nationally for the LGBTQ community to come here to Fort Lauderdale and to enjoy our beaches here. That's a huge bonus to our city. That is what I mean by strength through diversity, is that they are a benefit to having it, and we need to actually fight for them, and instead of doing the bare minimum of the law, we should look at policies that encourage and foster that. So thank you.
Brittany, can I respond to that for a second?
Sure.
I'm talking on a level here with sophisticated individuals that I understand should understand what I'm saying. The law is not dead. The law is never dead. You need people to enforce the law. You need advocates. The law is simply words on a piece of paper. I'm not referring to words on a piece of paper. Oh, that law. Okay.
Okay, thank you. I think we made it through everyone at least once.
I'm just going to say as a last little comment, I don't really think it's funny, to be honest with you. We know people have been hurt by that, and we cannot judge people because they're gay or straight or black or white or Jew or Gentile. So you can make fun of it, but I don't think it's a funny thing. I think it's a very important thing. Thank you.
Thanks, Tim. Okay, this one is starting with Steve. I have to ask about the wave because everybody wants to know.
Nice.
I'm going to read one of the reader questions or voter questions verbatim. This is not me saying this. The wave is an obvious waste of taxpayer money, both in the way of the federal grant as well as the additional and enormous contributions needed from our local residents. Would you state publicly if you will or will not do everything in your power to put a stop to the wave? Steve.
Yes, I think the wave is, number one, outdated technology. When the idea was presented around 1999, 2000, we've come so far. We now have Uber, we have Lyft. Right around the corner are autonomous vehicles. And by the way, the city does not really have a seat at the table when it comes to the wave. This is a county issue, folks. We can weigh in, but we don't have a voice. And even though this will cost us a small percentage, those dollars are still significant. But the cost overruns that have come in right now are astronomical. So I think that number one, the technology is outdated. The county cannot afford both the capital contribution and the maintenance. When the wave was first proposed, the county was on the hook for $1 million of maintenance a year. It is now up to $6 million a year. It's not sustainable. So I think that we can probably all say, yes, we don't want this, and I don't think any of the candidates up here want to support the wave. But I think what we're going to find is the county's going to have to kill it because it's just not sustainable.
Just to interject something, the city has obligated itself in prior votes to financially participate, and it is being researched whether the city could renege on its agreements. So if you could incorporate in your answer whether you would do whatever needed to be done legally to extricate the city from its obligation.
Yes, I would, because I think that we have to be smart about public transportation. I think what we have to do is, first of all, find out if any of those dollars that have been allocated to us from the national level can be used to be repurposed for another form of public transportation. Let's look at alternatives. Let's look outside the box. Let's see if there is a way that we can maneuver and use that for some other form of transportation. But yes, I agree that we have to do everything we can, because right now our participation would be at least $18 million right now. But again, that is a small percentage. It's mostly the county and the DDA that are on the hook for the capital contribution and also the yearly maintenance.
Thank you. Okay, Lester, would you have the city go to court or do whatever it needed to do to get out of its financial obligation?
Yes, I would. I agree with Mr. Glassman. The technology is passé. Recently, down in Miami, Dade County was going to extend their rail system. They did a financial tour review, and they came to the conclusion they simply couldn't afford to extend it. And here we are at the beginning of something. We could take lessons from the local, other municipal governments that are going on, or from the whole nation. There's so much information that's available on all of these infrastructure issues from around the country, and it just doesn't seem to me like people look beyond when they're on this commission here, and that's one of the reasons that I decided to run, was to take the knowledge that's available throughout the world and the country and bring it home to here, Fort Lauderdale.
Thanks. Tim?
Yeah, I think we're all going to have similar answers. The wave, we got that one wrong. It might have been right, as I heard Dean say, 15 years ago when it was brought up, the technology seemed smarter, the routes went to better places, the budget worked. But here we are 15 years later, the routes have been reduced, it doesn't go to the airport or the seaport. The wires overhead with the in-line on the street where you cannot move the trolley around if you have to, seems wrong technology, it's not working in other places. We know we've blown the budget out of the water. So the wave is basically dead. Now, if what Steve said can happen, and we can transfer that money to some sort of mass transit circulator around this great downtown that we're building, that would be wonderful. I don't know if it's possible, but I'd be certainly willing to push for it. And the main reason that the wave is definitely dead on arrival is nobody likes it. I'd probably ask 100 people, I could take a poll in here, anybody like the wave? Just nobody. You cannot have a main circulator built in your downtown that everyone despises.
Thanks. Chad?
Brittany, I would absolutely do everything necessary, and in the business world, sometimes you have to shut down a business when it's a bad business case, and sometimes you have to take the losses to do that. And in my mind, I would also look at returning the federal taxpayer dollars as well, because guess what? It is taxpayer dollars, and so we are still paying for it at a proportion. And the last piece is, the county can't afford their portion, and so, they would have to look at incorporating this in the penny transportation tax, so then we would get taxed twice on this poor system. I will tell you that when I worked with Florida East Coast and Brightline, I looked at the cost that was provided by the Coastal Link studies on connecting all 8 cities in Broward County, and for a lower cost than this being reported today for the Wave streetcar, which goes 8 city blocks, we could connect 8 cities in Broward County. This is the type of stuff that doesn't make sense, and the type of wasteful taxpayer spending that we have to stop for the future.
George?
I think the wave is just an abysmal example of an antiquated, poorly organized form of transportation. So absolutely, I would take every step possible to prevent it from moving forward. I think it's an example, though, of the characterization of all of our transportation issues in Fort Lauderdale, besides for traffic, and that is that there's no coordination. The wave started and ended at abrupt points in the city. It had virtually no linkages to any other form of transportation. So the very idea that our community would have used or embraced it is absurd. And I think as we move forward, we have to recognize the fact that our transportation systems have to be integrated, they have to be coordinated, they have to be linked, and they have to be likely to be used by the people who we hope to travel on them. To put a system together like that perhaps no one even wants to use is kind of tragic. And I think that's one of the mentalities we have to move away from, especially with transportation. I would also mention too that the wave would also have adverse effects on traffic, just based upon where the stations were, and on our heavily congested roads already. Any effect on traffic has to be minimized or negated.
Brittany, Tim said the word Steve. Can I just say something?
I didn't hear that, but I take your word for it. Okay.
He
Well,
did,
I was paying you a compliment at the time.
but he still used the word. So and that was the rule. I think that was the rule, right?
Raise your hand if you think Steve should get to rebut a compliment.
Thank you. Okay, beautiful. Thank you.
Keep in mind, he said Tim also at the same time.
No, well, it's fair, it's fair. I wanted to just say one thing that a lot of people haven't realized in the discussion of the wave, and I haven't mentioned it, but if you look in the fine print, everything about the wave has to be made in the United States. Now, the technology is actually booming in other parts of the world in terms of rapid transit. And that's going to be a real bugaboo for us, because we're not going to be able to use that technology and those people to build our system. I also want to mention that when this was first proposed, I wrote to the City Commission and I said, seriously, overhead wires all over downtown in a hurricane-prone city and climate what are we thinking about? And I received no response from anyone at the city, and then all of a sudden I noticed recently some of the city commissioners and the mayor have been talking about overhead wires. But I just wanted to bring up those 2 points. Thanks.
Thank you.
But because that is dead, it doesn't mean that we can give up on mass transit downtown. You know, we know the Sun Trolley is wrong too. This is wrong, but let's band together as a community. Let's figure out what is right and try to get it done.
Thank you. I think I only have time for one more question and then everyone's conclusions, because we're going to wrap this segment up at 8:30. So I'm going to go with the general question from last time, which was, how do you describe yourself politically? Starting with Lester.
I'm a physical conservative. I understand budgets very well. If you don't have the money, you don't play the games. Stockton, right now, if you want to do a little research on Stockton, went bankrupt. There are a lot of cities that are going bankrupt. If you can't hold your financial obligations, all of the people that you have in your pension plans, they don't get their pensions. They get cut in half. So by watching your budget, you're actually ensuring that your city employees do wind up getting paid. And in terms of social issues, one thing that no one really kind of pays attention to is that here you have a city charter. If you're sitting on the city commission, you are obligated to perform by the city charter. Anything that's not in that city charter, you really don't have the authority or power to do. You could do it on a personal basis, but you really don't have the power to enact social issues in the city of Fort Lauderdale. So socially, I think I'm a liberal and a conservative.
But you would do nothing for them, you're saying?
For whom?
For
For
whoever
whom?
would
Nothing
benefit
for
from
whom?
social program?
For social programs. Social programs in this area are primarily funded by Broward County. If you look into the city charter and you want to do something here locally, you have to approach it in a real way, not in a conversation sort of way. You have to look at the city charter, you have to allocate funds for it, and first of all, you have to give the commission and your mayor the authority to do so. You have the power to change the charter. The city commission doesn't have the power to change the charter, nor does the mayor. And certainly not the city manager. It's your city, it's my city.
Tim, how do you describe yourself politically?
Yeah, I just wanted to start by thanking these other 4 gentlemen that are sitting up here with me. They're all bright people. We all have a lot in common, including, I think...
You're still going to get a conclusion
No, I know.
after this
I'm going to
question.
get to that.
It sounded like you were wrapping up.
No, I'm not. But I wanted to say that, and this is kind of cogent from what we've heard so far tonight, all 5 of us have run a positive campaign. Our literature, you'll see, we talk about why we think we're the right candidate, not why the other one said this and the other one did that. So I'm just want to thank you all. I think if you took the best out of each one of us, you'd have a hell of a commissioner. But you got to pick one. I am a social liberal, dyed-in-the-wool, absolute, fiscal conservative, 100%. When I was a commissioner, the budget was $355 million, the all-funds budget. Today, it's $700 million. It's about twice. I'm not certain if the city is twice as good as it was. I think it is better. So I intend on taking a hard look at that and see where we're spending money where we shouldn't.
Thank you. Chad?
I think, I actually don't like this question, because I think one of the best things about this race is that it is nonpartisan. And look, I have people that are on both sides, the left and the right, that are supporting me, and I think that's a good thing. For myself, I would say I'm the only person up here that has a financial background, and so I'm able to look at things, and I don't think that using taxpayer dollars and stewardship of taxpayer dollars should be a progressive or a conservative issue. That should just be across the board. We should all do that. I think with regards to my social issues, I am progressive, and I'm actually in charge or a co-director for a young leadership development group here in Broward called the New Leaders Council, which focuses on a lot of these issues that we're talking about here in the commission, and trying to educate our young people on progressive policies and solutions for the future. So I thank you very much for the time, and George?
George?
I would say I'm a grassroots, proactive problem solver. I am not a political person by nature. The decision for me to run for office was based upon my belief that the city of Fort Lauderdale needed help and my own desire to be a public servant and to help. And that's why I'm sitting in front of you now. As a lawyer, I think I'm trained to be an advocate, to be a zealous advocate, and I think the city needs its commissioner to be a zealous advocate. As an epidemiologist, I was trained to deal with crises and to put together well-thought-through methodical responses to situations. And so I think as an epidemiologist, that brings me some unique perspective. As an organizer, I've organized my entire life, and I've brought people to the table from all different perspectives, and I've tried to effectively communicate with all those different folks and come to consensus. And I think that the commissioner that you elect has to be able to bring consensus. So, I think that the nature of what political affiliation I have is difficult to characterize. I would say that I am conservative as it relates to my spending.
Thank you. And Steve?
Yes, thank you. I would say that my politics is really all about people. For 20 years, I've lived in this district, and my entire 20 years has been spent in mostly public service, professionally and also as a community activist. I'm very proud of the fact that during my 6 years on the Planning and Zoning Board and as the president of the Central Beach Alliance, my concern was always about the people, and so therefore a party does not really matter, because it's really about making sure that the people are heard. One of the main reasons I'm in this race is because over the course, maybe the last 2 or 3 years in particular, I've just noticed a real disconnect between what the residents say when they come to this podium and talk to this dais, and what the neighborhoods say when they come to this podium and talk to the dais, and then what the dais does. It's like totally opposite of what they want as people. So that's my politics. And I really think it's important that we start making sure that we all have a voice on the commission, and I am hoping to be that voice for District 2. Thank you.
Thank you. Now, starting with Tim, you have 2 minutes to give a wrap-up statement. Thanks.
Did Lester get to answer that question? I guess he was first, huh?
Yep.
Okay.
Yes.
All right, thank you, Brittany, for taking on this challenge. Thank you, folks, for being here and being alert and citizens that are involved. I'm running for 2 reasons. First, the city has lots of issues, and I'm certain that I am the candidate that's in the best spot to solve those issues. I just have the most experience. There's no doubt about it. I served 6 years on the city commission, but more importantly, I spent my entire adult life in the civic arena in Fort Lauderdale. I've started 4 different neighborhood associations. I brought anti-crime programs to the city that we use today, like the Nuisance Abatement Board and community policing. I've led the effort to fix places like 13th Street that was once just a terrible place and now is trending. So I think I'm absolutely the best case, taking nothing away from these gentlemen because they're all wonderful. Secondly, I really enjoy the work. It dawned on me after Dean left the seat, and I sat looking at that open seat, my old seat sitting, I like this work, and I'm good at this work. I can't fish, and I'm terrible at golf, but man, I'm good at solving problems. So I jumped in. I'm excited about maybe being your next commissioner from District 2. I hope I can get there. I'll be the same gentleman if I lose, but I sure hope I win. Thank you.
John.
Hi, I'm going to tell you guys a little story. I was at a civic association meeting, and I remember listening to the people, and they were a very efficient civic association. They moved through their agenda very quickly. It looked like a business meeting, a military meeting that I had been a part of and everything. But they got to a point in the meeting in which they were lamenting, and they were all in 100% agreement that they wanted to do this. But they were lamenting on the fact that they didn't feel like they could be heard by the city commission and the city staff on this issue. And so what they ended up doing is they decided, well, maybe we should hire a lobbyist. And I got so angry at that point. It really bothered me, and I had to hold my tongue because this is not my forum. But I came up afterwards. I said, you don't need a lobbyist. You need someone who's going to be your voice and going to serve you in this community as a city commissioner. I think, you know, I moved to this city because I see the great potential that it has, and I wanted to achieve this potential. And as I've gone around, I've seen the major issues. You know, we have an infrastructure issue in which is not only going to affect us today, but we also have flooding and sea level rise of tomorrow. So when we go to fix our infrastructure today, we got to make sure that we're planning and synchronizing and moving towards a direction where we're putting money away so that we can actually fix our infrastructure for tomorrow. For transportation, you know, we don't want the wave streetcar, but what we do need is a transportation system from the airport to the Seaport Convention Center to downtown and to the beach. That's where our visitors, we will be able to take those off. The other thing is we need more pedestrian-friendly streets. You know, people can't get across the street to the post office. They have to get in their car to go there. Well, that adds to the traffic. The third issue is, you know, the homeless, addressing our homeless. It is important. I am morally opposed to putting U.S. citizens into a prison. They're homeless, they're not criminals, and we can't keep them there. It's not legal. And I will tell you that there are things that we can do as a first step to do this, and we can actually accomplish this together. I actually want to take our city and achieve its full potential, and I hope to serve you as a community, and I hope to provide my servant leadership for this city. Thank you.
Thank you. George?
Thank you. I think the city... My battery might be dead. I think the city's... Yeah. I think the city's in a position of tremendous change right now. The entire commission is essentially up for grabs, and there's so many issues that are facing the city. As a resident here, I've recently suffered through some issues. My automobile was robbed from my business. I own a business in the Flagler area. My home was burglarized. So I have a flavor for the fact that we have some issues with crime, and I think that we have to be proactive in tackling those crime issues. We have some problems with traffic. You can't drive around our city and not recognize that that's an issue for us, and as we grow, we're going to continue to experience that. So I think that you need a proactive person who's going to tackle that traffic issue. I think our city has some issues with how we handle and protect our environment. I think our city needs to be more aggressive in protecting our environment. We're a beach community. We're essentially the last of a community like ours for many, many ways. And so we have to protect and preserve that. As an agent for change, and I think that's really what I would be as your commissioner, I'm going to be proactive in listening to each of you. I'm not going to close my door once I'm elected and just move forward as though your voice is irrelevant to me. I've dedicated my entire life to serving folks and to doing so in a way that's integral and that's genuine. And I think that as a genuine, integral person, I'm going to come to this commission and lead us in a manner that addresses those priority areas. We have gaps in social services. We have problems with homelessness. We have issues that relate to our aging infrastructure. I think those things are all normal for a city of our size, but the solutions that we put forward have to be innovative. They have to be reflective of the fact that we don't have endless resources financially or endless resources from a human resource standpoint, so we have to be very, very efficient in the solutions that we put forward. And I think as your candidate, I bring those things to the table, and I believe we'll be very effective in leading our city to the next generation. Thank you so much. I look forward to your vote.
Thank you. Steve?
Thank you, Brittany, and thank you to the council for this evening, and thank you to all of you for being here. 3 years ago, our district had an abysmal 5% voter turnout. I find that so sad in a vital city and in a democracy to have 5% turnout. We need to do better than that. I'm running because I care and I love this city. You know, I look out in this room and it's amazing to me how many people I actually know in this room, and that's because for the last 20 years, I've been working with the neighborhoods on all of the issues that are facing this city. I'm also very proud to say that for the last 2 years, I've been a founding member of a group called Lauderdale Tomorrow. You might have heard of it. And I think if it wasn't for our group, we wouldn't even see any of these candidates for all of these races talking about infrastructure in this city. I think it was the work of our group that brought this issue to the forefront. I think it was our dogged research and our constant putting the pressure on the city commission to tell the truth about what was going on with our water and our sewer and our stormwater. And I really believe that our organization was the basis for the fact that we today have a blue ribbon task force, an infrastructure task force, which is doing amazing work. Amazing work, and I want them to be empowered to come up with a plan, and I want to use their expertise. I want the new city commission to sit down, figure out what the heck we're going to do going forward, because folks, we're facing a $1.4 billion cost for water and sewer, and a $1 billion cost for stormwater. We have to figure out what our priorities are. We have to reprioritize the budget. When I served for 6 years on the Planning and Zoning Board, my concern was always about the neighborhood, what they wanted, and then in the last year, I kept asking to see the water and sewer capacity letters. I wanted to see in our backup if projects could meet the demand of the projects that were before us. Unfortunately, I was usually on the losing side because of all the allegiances on that board. And that's something we have to change. We have to change the culture. So please help me get elected. Let's have a new face on this commission. And please, let's do what we need to do to make Fort Lauderdale all that it can be. Thank you for your vote.
Thank you. Lester?
I like solving problems. That's part of what I've been doing all my life. I've been self-employed since I got out of the military. I think I got out in 79. So since then, I've been working and I've been solving problems, and my main problems that I've been solving is how to pay my bills. I got to a point in my life where I could actually devote some time back to the community, and I decided to do so. The city went through a visioning process and didn't come up with a vision. If they come up with a vision, I need you to explain what that vision for the city is. The thing that's going on right now is that we're having a major change in the city. We're moving in a totally new direction. In terms of population, the demographics are changing, and you need a new vision. I think we all need a new vision for the city. And I believe I can present that to you as a commissioner. The other thing that kind of worries me over the years is how much knowledge we have in this country and how it seems to be not imported into the solutions that we come up with for the various problems. Nobody needed to tell me 3 years ago when I was running for the same office that we had infrastructure issues. I could drive my car on a rainy day and notice that the gutters weren't working. I could walk down the street and see that there were no lights above me, which is one of the biggest crime prevention implements you can possibly do, according to the police department, not me, is light your streets. I could see that there was no continuous sidewalks for anybody to walk on in terms of a pedestrian-friendly city, which everybody was pushing for so very hard. I could see that when I went down to the beach, and the city commission was pushing very hard for a family-friendly beach, that it wasn't conducive to that, because the city was allowing public land to be used for more or less private purposes and wasn't developing it for their families. So there was a contrary approach by what the commission was saying and what was actually happening. And I want to bring that to where what you really want is what's really going to happen. Thank you.
Thank you. And if we could just give a round of applause for the District 2 candidate. Thank you very much. We are going to shift to District 3 now, and we are right on time.
Right on time.
Thank you, candidates. I didn't drink any water because... Thank you. That I don't know. Well, they still have District 4, so you know some people are going to stay for that. Well, McKenzie's not here, I guess.
The empty seat, you want the empty seat here or what?
Yeah.
Well, he's not here, so I guess he's not here, so that's it.
He's not here. I take this, I told you, just no, leave the seat, because I can put my water on there. Okay.
All right, okay.
And my papers.
Okay.
I drove down here like a mad lady from Coral Springs. Yeah, I know, you're working.
Seem to be getting their microphones. Yeah.
But we only need 2 right now.
We only need 2. Yeah, but the one that he thought with the battery, what did he say was happening?
Testing, test that one.
Testing.
Good, let's go.
Okay, we're good. Okay.
Yeah, no, I have to fix all that. Thank you very much, appreciate it. I was not, so, I did not. I stayed in what's called Coast and Lower inside, Thursday, or North.
Hi, guys.
So.
Or do you want to stand there? Okay, we're ready on District 3. All right, paging Robert McKenzie.
Hi, how are you doing? Good, good, good.
Okay, I think Robert McKenzie will be the only of the 14 candidates on the ballot who is not here this evening. But I believe he RSVP'd that he would be here, so maybe he'll come in. All right, we have, starting on the left, Marie Miss Peaches Huntley, and yes, she will be on the ballot as Miss Peaches, and Donna Guthrie. So this session will run till just a little bit before 9. And like I said, we are still right on track. And if you ladies want to sit down.
These are not comfortable
I
chairs,
know,
I
I mean-
think. Thank you very much.
That's why I didn't wear a skirt, because I didn't want to have to sit on a stool in a skirt. Okay, let's start with Donna on the first question. Even though the vote has already been taken to spend $10 million in city CRA funds to build a new YMCA on Sistrunk Boulevard, controversy over that issue is still dividing the Northwest community. What is behind that, and how would you mend the fence, Donna?
Good night, everyone. Thank you for being here. I'm Donna Guthrie, and I'm pleased to see that everyone is in attendance. The controversy on Sistrunk in reference to the why stems from your commissioner not listening to the folks. That's the reason why we have this controversy. So the vote has already been taken. You get elected, you don't know what you could do on the back end of it. I think what we need in District 3 is someone that could collaborate with other representatives, because the CRA funding, it was meant for blighted communities, which District 3 Sistrunk is. I don't know why the money is being spent mostly in Flagler. People here might get offended, but Flagler was not blighted, I'm sorry. We have to find a way to make sure that CRA fund represents the community that it's meant for. We also have to find a way to mend the fence with the community as it, as it pertains to the why. So at this point, I think because I don't know the process, if it's signed in blood, we still need to have a conversation with the why, with the commission and with the community to see how we could move forward to make sure that everyone is satisfied with what's happening on the corridor.
And just to be clear, do you support the vote to spend $10 million on a new Y on Sistrunk?
No.
Okay. Oh, okay, just let me remind you of the timekeeper. Steve in the back is going to hold up a card, because you got here after I explained this.
Okay.
When you have 5 seconds left, the answers are 1-minute answers. He'll have an audible signal if you run over your 1 minute, and we're not being too terribly strict. And after the questions, you'll have the opportunity to give a 2-minute wrap-up.
Okay.
So, Ms. Peaches, what was your take on, do you support the vote for the Y? I think you work for the YMCA, so we should air that as well. What is behind this controversy that continues to divide the community, and what would you do to mend that fence?
Well, yes, I do work for the Y, and that's not what
made me vote for the Y. I'm also a long-term resident, 40 years, born and raised here in Fort Lauderdale. I believe in change, and that's what's starting to happening over in the 6 Trunk Corridor and the rest of Fort Lauderdale. People want to see something different. And as far as the controversy over what's going on when it comes to the YMCA, we can mend the fence, but we have to realize that there's things that are going to happen beyond our control, but in the best interest of those who are residing in this particular community. We went out into the community and we talked to the actual residents. We didn't just make a conscious decision to vote for the YMCA or vote for the new development. There were a lot of votes and a lot of people who were referenced in this particular vote. That time is really going to kill me. So we referenced the community, and I believe that the residents are the heartbeat of the community, so they should be involved first.
Thank you. And we still don't have Robert McKenzie here, but just for your knowledge, he's the incumbent commissioner. He's running for re-election. And I have to use a quote that Kristen Jacobs always said when she was on the county commission. Now she's a state rep, but she said, if you're not at the table, you're on the menu. So that might be the case. After years without much development or investment on Sistrunk Boulevard, we're seeing a lot of investment taking place. What concerns do you have, if any, with how development might change the Sistrunk corridor, and what is your vision? Ms. Peaches.
What concerns me is that there will be too much overdevelopment, and I'm not against development in 6 Trunk. Obviously, we need to make 6 Trunk vibrant, and it needs to be revitalized, but not at the cost of maybe overcrowding or displacing the people. So what was the second part of that question?
Well, what is your vision for a developed Sistrunk?
Well, to make sure that once developers come in to develop in the community, that they maybe, my vision is to have developers sign a community benefit agreement that will allow at least a percentage of the community to be a part of the building process. And then to also input an inclusionary zone, which says that those...
Do you mean to participate in the contracts, or what do you mean when you say to...
The work that will be done in the actual community with the development.
Okay.
Such as maybe affordable housing or things of that sort.
Okay, sorry, go ahead.
And once that's done, that the residents not only be just a part of the work, but they can benefit from it. As you know, maybe if we're building development as far as homes, then maybe affordable housing should be implemented so that they can benefit from it as well.
Okay, Donna, the question was, after years without much development on Sistrunk, a lot of investment is taking place. What concerns do you have, if any, with how development might change the Sistrunk corridor, and what is your vision for Sistrunk?
Okay, so we can't just have development for development's sake. We have to look at the community to see how we want to develop the community. Sistrunk is a historic neighborhood. So I think any development that is coming into Sistrunk should utilize the fact that it's a historic neighborhood, and we should use that to enhance the community. Developers that are coming in, they're not, first of all, there's no infrastructure. I don't think they're put in the infrastructure for the overdevelopment. And this is citywide. And so if you stuff everything, because what they're doing, they're stuffing everything right now into the Northwest community because the beach is overcrowded. So now they're looking to go that way. So when you displace our community, District 3, where are the people going to live? Where are they going to, there's no affordable housing, there's no place for them to live, there's no work. So you're going to bring in development and you're going to displace a lot of residents. Development has to be a twofold. Has to enhance the community community involvement, and all the stakeholders in that community need to be involved. We have to, when we're bringing in these big projects, we have to reach out to the stakeholders to say, this is what we're looking to bring, and how do you feel? We have a lot of intelligent folks in that community that we have to reach out to, and not just make back office deals with developers and then sell out the community. I'm all for development because we need it for the city. The city derives funds from it. However, it has to be in a manner where it's beneficial to the community.
Thank you. What would be your main complaint regarding how your current district commissioner is handling the job and representing the constituents, and why are you running against him? Donna, you can...
This is, okay, so everyone know, if you don't, I ran the first time. So the first time I ran, I'm a resident of the community. I live in Melrose Park. I've been the HOA president for 12 years. I'm already serving this community. I've been serving this community for a long time. So the first time Robert ran, he lived in the city of Plantation. So he shouldn't even, and this commission right here appointed him to that post, which was wrong. Then he ran and, okay, we said, let's give him a chance. He came into the city. As an HOA president, I have invited him to my meeting twice. He never showed up. They don't return phone calls. He's not responsive. He doesn't have an open door policy, and he doesn't involve the community in decision-making process. So I'm running because I will have an open door policy. I already do. I have a vision for the city. District 3 needs change. It's been run by the same over and over. When you drive through District 3 and you drive to the rest of the city, when I go around, everybody say, why do our neighborhood look different from the rest of the community? I go to Tarpon, I go to Victoria, everywhere else look different than District 3. We need to improve District 3. And some of the money that's going other places should also come into my community, because my community spend a lot of tax dollars. We pay taxes. We're contributors to this community, but we're not feeling as if we're getting the benefit of being the contributor to the community.
Ms. Peaches? Should you repeat that? This was where we get to the part where Commissioner McKenzie's on the menu. What is your main beef with, well, I should preface this by saying Commissioner McKenzie has praised you and said that he would vote for you if he were not running, and that you share some philosophical approaches, I guess, to how the district should be run. But you are running against him. What is your main beef in how he's representing the constituents, and why are you challenging him?
Because the voice of the community has been unheard for too long. And as far as the constituents, there's 85% over in 6th Trunk, well, might I say just District 3, who are renters. So these people are the forgotten folks. They don't have a voice. They don't feel like they can be a part of civic associations, I'm sorry, because of membership. But when I redesigned Home Beautiful Park Civic Association, it was for stakeholders, those who are renters, and those who have a common interest in 6th Trunk, or in 6th Trunk, because that's where it is. But the voice of the community has been unheard for too long, and now we need to put a voice and a face for the people to see, someone who's visible. And that's the reason why I'm running against him, because even he knows that I'm doing the work now. I'm not waiting to get in the seat. The work is being done now.
Well, that segues right into this question that came from one of the voters. What have you done as an individual to make life better for the citizens of District 3, especially our seniors and young people? And I should have also said in the introductions that Donna is in Melrose Park, which is off Broward Boulevard, and Ms. Peaches is in Home Beautiful, which is off Sistrunk, and Commissioner McKenzie is in Doers, which is also off Sistrunk. But what have you done as an individual to make life better for the citizens of District 3, Ms. Peaches, this one starts with you.
Okay, so I have a nonprofit organization, and right now we've been out feet to ground. We started a movement, and the movement says that everybody gets to have a voice and they have a choice in all matters that concern the community. So the nonprofit organizations that we work with are grassroots, and they're changing the lives of the youth by way of letting them be included in decisions such as, with one of the projects, the kids are allowed to be the lead artists on the mural project, which combats vandalism. We changed the life of two of the lead artists by sending them off to college on $60,000 scholarships. Also, when it comes to our seniors, they have programs that are just for them, such as parent time out and things like that are social clubs for them that allow them to come out into to the community and take a breather. Now, as far as what we're doing when it comes to, I told you that timer is just not long enough.
That little dinging, ding, ding. You can throw it into your wrap-up in a minute. Go ahead, Donna.
Okay, so when I became president, when I became involved with the Melrose Park Community Association, it was just a regular, normal homeowners association. And I thought that we could add more. So what we have done under my suggestions, we give out scholarships. So we have a scholarship program yearly that we reach out to Stranahan, the high schools in our area, and we offer scholarships to the kids that live in Melrose Park. So they could, go through their brace advisor. I reach out to the brace advisor and let them know that we have the scholarships available. They'll come and we'll offer the scholarships. And the only thing we ask them to do is write an essay. We don't look at grades. We just say write an essay as to why you like living here. And I particularly offer scholarships to young black boys, African-American boys, because they're our most at-risk folks in this community. We also have, we do a lot of things, that's generic to
Your time is up.
Okay, it's up, okay. Thank you.
Thank you. That way we can cover at least one more question. The highest ridership for the TMA Sun Trolley is in this district, and but the TMA is suffering some financial troubles, and as we discussed earlier this evening, the WAVE rail system is possibly going to be killed. So how would you improve access to public transportation in this district, which has high ridership of mass transit? Ms. Peaches? How would you improve access to public transportation, given that the Sun Trolley has financial troubles and there might not be a wave coming?
Under my leadership and under effective collaborating with the Department of Transportation, Home Beautiful Park Civic Association, some of the other civic associations have written letters because we were asked to be a part of the process in which they're asking for money for transportation, so we wrote letters to assist with that. Now, as far as accessing the actual transportation, that was a problem at first, but in effective collaboration in the community with the residents and Department of Transportation coming out to be a part of some of our meetings, and not just civic association meetings. And then also they allowed us to add questions to the survey that addressed the actual issues of the residents. So I would continue to collaborate with Department of Transportation to be more effective in our residents accessing the transportation.
Thank you. Donna?
Transportation is not just a City of Fort Lauderdale problem, it's a Broward County problem. This is where collaboration with other leaders would come into effect. I have a very good relationship with Commissioner Holness and also with Congressman Hastings. Current commissioner, he doesn't even answer them or answer meetings with them. They've invited him to meetings, he ignores them. So this is where you have to find dollars. It's not a problem of it just has to go away. We have to source money to fund these. These benefit District 3 more than any other community. The ridership is absolutely 100% or you know, most District 3, because everybody else have cars. District 3 is disproportionately riding public transportation. So I do not agree with they're going away. I think we need to find a way to keep transportation for my district in the city. To me, it's not a choice of saying it's going away. We have to do better.
Thank you. Now, you'll have a couple minutes each to give some conclusionary comments, and maybe if you could include in that your top 3 issues for District 3. I think we're starting with Donna this time.
Okay, thank you, everyone. I'm just going to say one thing before I do my top 3 issues. As candidates running for office, we need to respect each other. And I'm going to address the issue of my signs being stolen. I have put out signs. I don't know who has been taking them up, but I'm just going to say my opponent has, and he could sue me if he wants to. Because my signs have been put on private property and they have disappeared. These signs are not cheap. Very expensive, and I don't have money, so anyone in here that likes my message and want to fund me, elect.guthrie.com, go there and donate, because they've taken up all my signs. Okay, so, and my top 3 things for District 3. District 3 needs employment. It just doesn't need redevelopment. We need training for these folks, because like I said before, you bring in the redevelopment and the folks are not equipped for the jobs that it's going to bring about, you're still going to bring in people from outside the area to work at these jobs. So I think the first thing we need to do is train. Years ago, we had the BETA program, where you would offer job training, give people a stipend. At the end of it, they would have a job. This is what we need, because once you have the jobs in the district, that the money will flow. The development will come in, the houses, you know, people will start to take care of their property. We also need infrastructure. The infrastructure problems throughout the city, but in District 3, we've been neglected. We've been neglected for years because we had no one really fighting for us. So we have to be able to collaborate with the other commissioners to say we have to prioritize the poorest of the poor. We have to prioritize District 3 and say some of the money that's been going everywhere else should now start to come. And we have to also make sure that CRA fund is targeted for the area where it was supposed to be, which is my district.
Thank you. Ms. Peaches?
So it's pretty obvious I'm not the traditional candidate. I'm not, but I do possess progressive values. So it is always going to be about the community. It is always going to be geared towards what's best for the residents of District 3. Now, we have residents living in serious vermin and also molded and roach-infested homes. So affordable housing is something that nice, safe, clean housing is something that I am really going to be pushing, because they deserve to live in an environment that's not hazardous for their health. Another thing that I would like to do is implement what I call my SHE lens. SHE for sustainable. The H is for, S for sustainable, the H is for healthy, and then the E is for what's equitable for the actual community. If we apply the SHE lens to every single area when it comes to water and sewage, how sustainable it's going to be for the community long term? What are we going to do when issues arrive? Is it healthy over time? Will it be in the best interest of the actual residents? Is it equitable? We can talk equal all day long, but we do know that everything is not equal We're District 3. We're a little bit different from the rest of the districts, and what we need in District 3 may not be what you need in 1, 2, and 4. But definitely equity will allow decision makers and policy makers to make those hard decisions on what needs to be placed in each district and what's coming to each district. So equity, when I talk about equity, it's according to our circumstances. You can't give me something that District 4 has. Like infrastructure over there may be great for them, but over in District 3, it'll be overdevelopment. It'll be, we don't want to have overdevelopment over in District 3. That way residents feel like they're being pushed out. So I'm running, hope I can get your vote. But again, untraditional candidate, but do have the heart of the community.
Thank you. And if we could give applause to both candidates, thank you very much. Thank you very much. And we've got one more district, District 4, coming up next.
Let me hide the banner. Over just a little bit more. You're good. Yeah. Oh, no. Steve, you want to get it? You guys are safe. I got dead batteries.
Okay, Brittany, they're ready.
All right, let's begin with District 4. We have 3 candidates, we have 3 mics, so that's good. No sharing required. Starting on the far end, we have Warren Sturman, who lives downtown. Walter Duke, who lives in which neighborhood? Rio Vista. And so does Ben Sorensen. Okay. This session is the last session, and it will wrap up at 9:30. So let's start with residency in the city, because looking at the questions that were specific to your race and that have come up at forums and in emails and such, people have asked, and I'm going to start with Walter Duke, because I have a candidate-specific question for him. You were an elected official in Dania Beach. You left your seat early. You moved to Fort Lauderdale, and you immediately started running for office. Why was it so important to run for office in Fort Lauderdale when you had just moved to the city?
Yeah, sure, thank you. I actually had 2 of my terms cut short in Dania Beach. My first term, when I got elected commissioner in 2009, we changed the charter to go to November elections to increase the turnout and to decrease the cost. Like, for instance, this election in Fort Lauderdale is costing us $1.5 million. And the turnout's going to be abysmal. So 6 months was cut off my first term. On my second term, I resigned February, about 8 months or 7 months prior to the end of the term. have always intended, Lisa and I always intended to move to Fort Lauderdale after I served my term in Dania Beach. We had intended to retire here. We love it here. My grandparents came here in the 50s. I moved here in 1965, and so it's just a place where we're active civically, professionally, socially, and we really love it. So on the weekends, we would go look for homes and drive to different neighborhoods that we liked, and we found one. We went to contract on it, and the city charter states that if you do not live in the city, you must resign. And so it was a hard decision, but I did leave the city in excellent condition, much better than when I found it. And so I resigned per the charter and followed the law and moved to Fort Lauderdale. And the reason that I got engaged in Fort Lauderdale is because folks whose opinion I respected greatly said, if you're going to run, if you're going to be involved in local government in Fort Lauderdale, you should step up and you should qualify. You should file to run and let everybody know you're interested. So I think Ben actually filed a week after I did back a couple of years ago, and so we've been campaigning ever since.
Thank you.
Should we comment on that too?
You'll get to, yes, but you're not next. Sorry. Ben, if you could just take us through the other Broward cities that you've lived in, when you moved to Fort Lauderdale, and why you decided to run for elected office.
Sure. Thank you, Brittany, and thank you to all of you still being here and still being awake. Appreciate it. I moved to Fort Lauderdale in 2008 and lived in Fort Lauderdale for years. And then when I married my wife, Anna, thank you for being here, Anna, we bought our first house, and one of the places that was very affordable for us in the right place was Hollywood, and so we lived there for just a little bit, and then moved back to Fort Lauderdale, where Anna works at the NSU Art Museum, and we both have been long involved in the city of Fort Lauderdale. My wife's parents have been here since, or her family has been here since 1979, and for years we've been passionately serving our city here. I'm a guardian ad litem here in Fort Lauderdale. I served on the Fort Lauderdale Education Advisory Board. I serve on a Broward County Human Rights Board. I'm a chaplain for the Fort Lauderdale Police Department, so I've long been involved here, long passionate here, and feel a call to service and serve our community here in Fort Lauderdale.
Thank you. Okay, Warren, now you get your turn.
That goes...
If you could address in your answer, you've been a Rio Vista HOA president, but you don't live in Rio Vista, so if you could address that. And you're a busy doctor. Why are you running for city commission?
The main reason I'm running for city commission, you hit it on the heart. Both of the candidates are very nice guys, but both of them were required to move here just to qualify to put their name on the ballot. I've lived in this district for over 25 years. I've been president of Rio Vista for over 12. I still have a home there. My ex-wife, who's part of my campaign, lives there with my children, so I'm very active in that community. I currently live downtown also, so I've worked in both communities, and that's basically the reason why I decided to run for city commission, because I want the city and the neighborhoods to be represented.
Thank you. On the issue of development, whose voice is better heard in City Hall, developers or residents? And if you believe developers have the advantage, what would you do about it? And we'll start with Ben.
It is, the score is 1 developers, 0 residents, and that needs to change. The developers have an outsized voice on our city, within our city, and I'm running in part because the residents' voices are not being heard. When I've knocked on 4,000 doors, and when I'm talking to voters, they say, Ben, why doesn't the city commission listen to us? Why don't they hear us? We have concerns, we have issues, and that needs to change. Why it is that way is because you have developers that are supporting and funding candidates, and you have candidates that work for developers in multiple capacities. I'm someone who's going to be an independent voice, who's going to be able to stand up and say no to developers and do the right thing for our city and for our residents, because with Ben Sorensen, residents are going to come first.
Thank you. Warren?
Well, I strongly feel that the neighborhoods are not represented. Look what happened with Bahia Mar. It was a done deal before we even got there. I'm the only candidate of the three of us, the only candidate who stood up over there and spoke publicly against Bahia Mar, because I am not beholden to lobbyists, I'm not beholden to developers, and I think that they are going to get a majority of the city commission seats, and we've got to keep this as a neighborhood seat, and the neighborhoods are not being heard. I'm the voice of the neighborhood.
Walter?
Well, in my public service, I always just follow what the taxpayers want to do. I listen to you guys. You're the boss. You pay the salaries, you pay the bills, you bear the brunt of the decisions that are made by this commission up here. So for the last 9 years, what we've experienced is probably the most prolific pro-development commission in the history of Fort Lauderdale. I think they've approved, I want to say, 6,300 rental units, over 1 million square feet of commercial office space, and a lot of hotel rooms. And it doesn't seem to me like they were listening, because I see a lot of objections to things like VMR and to other projects. So, when I was served in Dania Beach, I listened to the residents. The residents did not want any development on the beach. And so what do you see down there? You see a family-friendly passive beach. That's what the taxpayers wanted. The taxpayers wanted small hotels downtown to get people into their shops, to renovate the downtown, and that's what you see down there, are small hotels. And then the residents also wanted to see, at Sterling and 95, they wanted to see Dania Point, which is a lifestyle shopping center. They wanted shopping options, and they wanted tax base, and they wanted jobs, and that's what they got. So I really just listen to you guys. I do what the taxpayers want to do, and I think that's good practice for local government.
Ben?
Did you already?
Oh, oops, sorry.
It's getting late.
Yes. Hinging on that, if a slow growth majority is elected to the city commission, and it appears possible, is there any danger that Fort Lauderdale's economy could be hurt if the development wave comes to a halt? And how would you describe yourself in terms of, if no growth is on one end and slow growth in the middle, developer friendly on the other, where are you? Ben?
Not only will we not be adversely impacted if we choose smarter, slower growth, but it's actually in the best interest for all of us. Economic vitality depends on great neighborhoods, which we have in Fort Lauderdale. It depends on great infrastructure, which we're sorely lacking in so many ways. Our streets have massive issues. When I'm talking to residents, we have major problems, not only from the integrity of the streets, but from a traffic light synchronization system to $2.4 billion in need for our infrastructure. If we can focus on job number one, our infrastructure, getting it right, investing in our cities, investing in our sewers, and doing the right thing, it is going to be the best not only for economic growth, but for tourism growth and for doing the right things for each of our neighborhoods. But that means putting job number one of taking care of the residents first.
Warren? Thank you.
Okay, we've grown at such a tremendous rate that we've outgrown our ability to sustain it. The city has not met a developer they don't like. My background includes an undergraduate degree in engineering, and I've met with the city engineers. I've toured the water and sewer plants and met with Public Works. We cannot sustain it for the moment, and we've got to be able to get a handle on traffic and infrastructure before we do any more growth at this particular point. There's no two ways about it.
Walter?
Well, there's not going to be a lot that this next commission can do about 6,300 units that are already approved, other than manage that process. And that's what they're going to have to do. We're going to have to make sure that the construction site is proper, that it's cleaned up. I mean, downtown is a neighborhood. Before anything else, it's a neighborhood. We talked about this tonight earlier over at Sabre Cinema. But moving forward, I think, economic growth is really isn't just real estate and development. It's good schools, it's good parks and open spaces, it's things that attract families, that attract CEOs to want to raise their families here. And too long here in Fort Lauderdale, we've suffered from what I call brain drain, and that is where we have our best and brightest go away to college or go away to the military and stay away. And we want them to come back. And so you have to provide a very clean, enticing, warm, friendly, well-lit, safe place for people to live that's exciting and energizing, and people want to live here and work here and play here and retire. So it's really more than just tied to development. But moving forward, I think what we need to do is make it clear to the community, the development community, that we are better. We're better than what we've seen. We're better than this, and we expect more. We expect more skin in the game, and we expect more iconic development.
Thank you. Let's move to the issue of traffic, a favorite issue for the voters. For years, political candidates in the city have talked about better timing or syncing of the traffic lights. I've heard it talked about this evening. As one voter asked, why are we sitting at red lights all the time? If the lights were properly timed, you wouldn't be sitting at a light when there's not traffic coming from the other direction. But this is a county function. The city and the county do not have very good relations. But given that many of the clogged roads, like Southeast 17th Street, are in the city limits, what would you do to once and for all deliver on this promise for better timed traffic signals? And Maureen, you start.
Okay, it's funny, I am the candidate, and I actually do sit on the 17th Street Traffic Advisory, and we meet every month, the last several months. It's an initiative from the city. We have the county there, the city, the port, the seaport, as well as the Florida Department of Transportation. We're working on synchronizing the lights, but also several other things. We're adding another another ramp onto 595 southbound. To alleviate southbound US 1. Everybody who's sat for like 2-3 light changes on US 1 coming out of the port on 84, it's horrendous trying to get out of the city. We're going to be changing the timing there to encourage the truckers to take Eller Drive, so that way instead of a 3-light change, you'll have a free clearance going down southbound on US 1. That should eliminate or alleviate a lot of the traffic coming out of 17th Street. Also, we're looking at a parallel road to 17th Street. Regarding working with the county, I have a phenomenal relationship with both of my county commissioners. We work together on a regular basis. I speak to them, and the timing of the lights is a county issue. That's part of what we're dealing with this traffic advisory.
Walter?
Thank you. You know, if any one of these candidates sitting up here tonight, or anyone that was here before us, or anyone that comes after us, sits up here and tells you they're going to solve Fort Lauderdale's traffic issues, they're just being disingenuous, or they're just trying to get elected, because they're just not going to solve it. But having said that, I will tell you this: Fort Lauderdale, we have 100,000 people a day come into work here. We have 32 million people a year flying to the airport. 25 million of them come north. So we are an attractive nuisance. People want to come here. They want to be here. And so our job is, much like Disney World, is to plan it better, to coordinate it better. When you go to Disney, all those cars go up to Disney and they move you conveniently into a lot, they tram you over to where you need to go, and that's kind of the thinking that we need to bring here, is how can we do it better, because we're not going to change the fact that the cars are going to come here. Where do we park them? How do we tram them around town? Do we have better wayfinding? Those things are very, very useful. As far as the 17th Street, the Convention Center goes in 17th Street, I will not sign off on a Convention Center expansion unless we get that bypass road, and it sounds like we are headed in that direction, which is a very positive thing. So it's really moving the tourists around, moving the service trucks around, freeing up the roads for the locals so that we can get around without going back-to-back traffic. Synchronization works north-south, but east-west with the bridges and trains, it's very challenging.
Ben?
Who thinks narrower streets are the answer to our traffic solutions? No one. Why not? Because we're making the wrong decisions for our city. We're making poor financial decisions that are costing you and me dollars. As your city commissioner, that's going to stop. We're going to focus on getting traffic moving smoothly and clearly. And by the way, that's something I've already been working on. Believe it or not, even today as a candidate, when we have traffic light synchronization issues and there's one light that seems to be out, I'm able to talk to the city, talk to the county, immediately start to work on this and get issues resolved. It doesn't mean we're resolving all of them right now, but that's my mindset. I'm a big tent kind of guy, and I'm going to have the relationships with the county, with the city, to not only implement traffic light synchronization, but to also look at, for example, forcing all commercial port traffic getting in off Eller Drive rather than moving down 17th Street, having a parallel route to 17th Street, and finally, finding really effective transportation that works for the city. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, a new topic specific to this race that comes from the voters, temperament. I'm going to start with Walter on this one, and with a little bit of a candidate-specific question. We know that Dania Beach had discord on the city commission when you were in office, and then we wrote a story in 2012 when a campaign manager said that you struck him after he had said something about your wife. Given some of the public displays of incivility in Dania, can you address this issue, and also can you name a time when you've worked with someone who didn't support you politically?
Boy, it sounds like some folks from Dania are here tonight. That's a pretty specific question. Listen, Dania Beach is a very challenging political environment. I was politically naive. I never ran for office before. Like many people, rarely voted in the local elections, which I took a lot of fair criticism for. But, you know, even during that time when we only had 4 commissioners, because one commissioner got caught living outside the city and still tried to serve illegally, and she got flushed out, so we had 4 commissioners. And it was a very challenging political time. You know, but having said that, during all of that time when we had political challenges, we got a lot done. We executed the airport settlement agreement, paving the way for the south runway, and for homeowners in Dania Beach that were impacted to get almost $100,000 per home. Okay, between sound insulation and cash payments. A guy that works for me today told me that he's going to his closing next week where he gets a check for $67,000. We worked together to clean up the beach. If you look at the quarterdeck and the marina down there and how well that is, and if you remember what it looked like before, how bad it was, and now it was $250,000 a year in revenue, now it's $3 million of revenue. So during all of that political discord and all that negative, dirty politics that I had to endure, like people came before me in Dania, we got a lot done policy-wise. We got a lot done for that city and a lot done for the taxpayers. And you know what? I'm not afraid to stand up to people that want to do things that are against the taxpayers. I'll always stand up and challenge them.
But can you name a time when you've worked with someone who didn't support you politically?
Well, sure. Everything that I just mentioned, I worked with them. We voted 4-0 on the airport settlement. We voted 4-0 on the waterfront revitalization plan to clean up Dania Beach at the pier. So, I mean, all of those things that we got done. We got collective bargaining done with the city. We moved the fire department from the city to the county to save taxpayers money. We got out of the insurance business. I could go on and on and on with things that we voted for unanimously. It was just the small town politics that was really the thing that you're talking about.
Ben?
Well, if y'all remember a couple of years ago, you remember Ferguson and the Dallas shootings, the police shootings? Well, I'm a Fort Lauderdale police chaplain. My boss, Ron Perkins, is here, who's the head chaplain for police and fire here. And as that was happening, one of the main concerns I had was, what about Fort Lauderdale? This could happen here in Fort Lauderdale. And there started to be rising tension between some of the Black Lives Matter leaders and our police force. And so I thought to myself, what can I do to help this? So what I did is I brought together the leading law enforcement chiefs for Broward County, the majority of them, together. I brought the leaders of Black Lives Matter together. I brought them together behind closed doors. And I sat them down and we ate lunch together and we talked about how we feel about each other and the frustrations, the misperceptions, the anxiety, the anger. And through that experience, 4 meetings later, we had an incredibly productive relationship, tensions lowered, and we started working together on things in an incredible way.
Warren?
I'm actually glad you asked that question. I have a long history of working with other neighborhoods and other leaders. As president of Rio Vista and working for 2 decades, I've worked with other neighborhoods on such things as parks. We've worked on things as emergency response for hurricanes. I've worked for trying to get our fire station back in here. I've worked with the Downtown Civic Association, and I have a long history of working for things for the benefit of this community. I've reached out to Ben. Ben will admit this. I said, listen, after this election, we're going to sit down and talk for the benefit of this community. I've reached out to Walter. I'm going to put an end to the speculation. It was me who that Walter posted on his Facebook that actually reached out to Walter and said, listen, after the election, let's sit down and put our, behind us and work for the benefit of the community. For some reason, I was labeled it was laughable, and I was a politician, and I guess that it's bad to work with somebody else. I guess I'm not a politician, guys.
Walter, could you address that?
Is there anything to address?
He's saying that, he's talking about your Facebook post. That
Well, the
you,
funny thing for me was, as being somebody that's experienced in local government, so you've sort of seen it all and heard it all, was to get a nice call, and he's never called me before, to get a nice call on the same day that a negative ad came out that was from his campaign. So I just thought that was kind of funny, and I just made light of it.
Warren, did you send out a negative ad?
Those guys have tons of money. I don't have nearly as much. I have no negative. I didn't send any negative ads. No, I have not sent any negative ads. I have no idea what he's talking about.
Do you have it, Walter?
Yeah, listen, it's the fake ballot with the candidates filled in. I think Dale Holness put it out, and Sturman was on it, and 4 or 5 of the other,
I actually haven't seen that. If you could send it to me, I have not seen it.
Okay.
Was it derogatory against me, or what?
No, it was a fake ballot that had you bubbled in.
Right. The source of that is unknown, I believe, right? It didn't have a attribution or a disclaimer.
Just me or a bunch of people?
It had 4 candidates bubbled in, and it did not have the disclaimer. Lastly, before the wrap-up, on the convention center expansion and hotel that would probably dramatically affect 17th Street and that whole area that already is problematic. What is your position going into that?
Right. So number one, BMR is a bad idea. It's a bad project. That's going to only dramatically exacerbate the traffic on 17th Street and on the beach. Number two, the convention center growth for the hotel. I think what we need to say is a bypass road and traffic mitigation has to be done by the city. We have to look to a parallel route to 17th Street. We have to look to forcing commercial traffic off of 17th Street before we move forward with the convention center expansion.
Warren?
Right, on the 17th Street Advisory, and I serve on that, and actually Ben has come to a meeting or two there. We're looking at a few things. Number one, as we mentioned, having that bypass road, like 20th Street is one of the things they're looking at. We would love to have the county have a bypass road going from the 595 back into the convention center, but they said no, it's over $100 million project. They nixed it for the moment. We're currently doing a study looking at traffic when the peak times when the cruises are in, as well as when they have conventions and things there. And once we have a handle on that, we're going to come up with some interesting solutions, such as adding extra police officers for traffic controls on days that we've designated are going to be traffic issues. So there's a lot of things that we're working on. We're still in the planning phase. The other thing that we realize is we are working together, like I mentioned, the city, county, port, seaport, airport, and the State Department of Transportation are actually working together very well on a regular basis to try to find solutions for this. I think we're very proud of what the city and the county are working together. And like I mentioned, my relationship with the county is phenomenal.
Walter, your position on the convention center?
Sure, I just
hotel?
touched on it just a minute ago, but I'll repeat it. I will not sign off on the convention center expansion unless we have an adequate bypass road solution through the port. I've met with Alan Cohn from the county, who's the assistant city manager, who's on point for the convention center expansion, and he showed me the plan, and this was about a month or two ago, even before he had taken it around to the city commission or the county commission, and it looked like a pretty good idea to me. Although he did confide to me that the bypass road from the airport to the convention center would only alleviate about 10% of the traffic on 17th Street. So I don't want anybody up here to think that if there's a bypass road, all of a sudden 17th Street's going to be free and easy. It's still going to be pretty busy. The other thing, too, that I've learned is that with a larger convention center, you attract conventions that stay for a week. Rather than conventions that come every day and drive into the convention center, drive back, drive in. So there's trips every day, there's traffic every day. Whereas if you expand the convention center, you will attract conventions that stay for the whole week, and they walk to the hotels, they walk around, they take the water taxi. So I think there's some benefit there by expanding the convention center in that way, but only on our terms.
Thank you. Okay, now candidates, you have opportunity for a 2-minute wrap-up. Whose turn is it to go first? Walter. All right.
Sure. Listen, it's late, so I'm going to keep it brief. These are good guys. We live in the same neighborhood, or you live close to us, you live downtown, and Ben and I, and we always show up. This is about our 12th or 14th forum. We could have carpooled and dramatically decreased our carbon footprint, but we haven't. Yeah, there's been times when we've driven over behind each other. It's kind of funny. So I don't know if there's much else we can argue about or talk about. But seriously, for a minute, if you think about this job, District 4 is in my opinion one of the most important and influential financial and political districts in the state. When you just think about what's here, I mean, even though we're a small town with beautiful neighborhoods, 17 neighborhoods, we're in the shadow of a major airport and a major seaport. And we get that influence. Our fire department's the busiest in the nation. We are part of a very important and big enterprise. It's a billion-dollar city with billion-dollar problems. I'm the only candidate up here that has actual hands-on working experience in local government, and I want to leverage that experience for the benefit of my district residents and taxpayers. My business has been here for Arnardale for 42 years. I've been here 32 of them. I do real estate appraisals. My opponents and every opponent I've ever run against likes to slam me that I'm beholden to developers because I do real estate appraisals. It's silly. It's false. It's wrong. It's campaign narrative for people that are desperate to get elected because there is absolutely no track record or no evidence to suggest that. And in fact, I would submit to you that my skill set is actually extremely useful to represent you on the dais, because when something like Bahia Mar comes up, I know when it's BS and it's not BS. I understand those metrics. I can make sure that we're adequately represented in that community, and I think that's a strength. I have plenty of time on my hands. My kids are grown. I live right nearby. My office is right over on 84. I'm here all day. You know, I don't have a home in North Carolina. I don't have a Harley or a boat or a plane. I'm here working. And I like to work hard. I'm an extremely hard worker. And anybody that knows me and anybody that has seen me work in local government knows how hard I work. Thank you very much. I just want to leave you with this. Vote the top bubble on the ballot. The top bubble that says Walter Duke for District 4. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Walter. Ben?
Thank you, Brittany. Thank you all. You know, I think the best way to look at this, as you see these candidates and we're interviewing for a job, is look at what we have done. I've been in Fort Lauderdale for years, and I've been working on your issues. Sober homes was a big issue as I was knocking on doors, and so what I do about sober homes that were unchecked in terms of regulation here in Fort Lauderdale, I banded together with the Civic Association of Fort Lauderdale. We passed ordinance as a civic association, and now we're going to start regulating sober homes in the city of Fort Lauderdale. Homelessness. I co-founded an organization called Mission United, United Way, to address veterans homeless in Fort Lauderdale. We've housed over 800 homeless folks here in Fort Lauderdale. When people like Lynn call me up and say, hey Ben, a tree is down, the street's torn up, I'm the one who's actually going out there and helping to get the city staff on it and working on the issues that are important to you. I run a small business that does corporate leadership and sales training. I work with Fortune 100 companies. I get to advise those companies how to be more efficient, how to be more effective. I'm in the Navy Reserves. Okay, I work as an intelligence officer and get to advise some of the highest levels in our national government around how to implement national security measures. But most important, I'm here, I'm in your neighborhood, I'm in your community. I want to be a workhorse for you. I want to be someone who's going to solve problems, who's going to have your voice heard, and someone that's going to work to make sure that Fort Lauderdale is the best city it can be by leaving none of our neighborhoods, none of our residents behind, and that you can always have a line to me, and I'm always going to be there for you. My name's Ben Sorensen. I'm running to be your District 4 Commissioner, and I would love to have your vote. Thank you.
Thank you, Ben. Warren?
My name is Dr. Warren Sturman. I'm a cardiologist. I'm also an undergraduate degree in engineering, which would help us with our two biggest issues, traffic and infrastructure. All of us live we all have homes in Rio Vista. I'm actually been the president of Rio Vista for over 12 years. I'm going to try to make this simple. There are 6 names going to be on our ballot, 3 for the mayor, 3 for the commissioner, listed alphabetically. I will be on the bottom of your ballot. You don't have to look for me. Just go to the bottom of your ballot and that Warren Sturman if you like me. The reason I entered this race is because I strongly feel that the neighborhoods are left out. We need a neighborhood voice. Like I mentioned, actually they're nice guys, and I do like both of you, by the way. I like you very much. I think this is the last time we're going to be together publicly, and I want to thank you for running. But it's not about you. It's not about me. It's about us, the neighborhoods. And I strongly feel the neighborhoods need to be represented, and not some outside interest. Both of them had to live in a different city simply to qualify when they recently ran. There's an open seat. Both of them had to move here simply to qualify to put their name on the ballot. As a resident for 25 years, I think we could do better. Aside from president of my neighborhood, and I'm the founder and the chief of the city's CERT team, I've been involved, like I said, in the city's advisories with education, traffic, infrastructure, parks, and public safety for over 2 decades. I'm the only candidate, like I mentioned, who actually stood up and spoke against the Bahia Mar project. I think if you go on our website and see who has donated large sums of money, and you look at it, and you'll see why I am not beholden to developers of special interest. Don't take my word, don't take their word. Go yourself on the city's website and look who has contributed to us. You can trust me when I talk about I'm not going to favor the wave, I'm going to shoot the wave down. I have a track record here. I've worked to add public space. I've worked to get the fire station back here. I've worked with disaster preparedness. Just a little bit about myself. I have 4 children. They were all born, raised, and went to school here. I'm an engineer, like I mentioned. I love the city, and I want your help to make sure that we keep this as a neighborhood spot. I need your help. I'm up Warren Sturman at the bottom of your ballot.
Thank you. All right, applause for all 3. And that concludes our candidate forum. Thank you for your interest. Candidates, thank you for your participation, and voters, don't forget to vote.